Okay, good evening everybody. Welcome to this evening's Place Committee, which is the last of this municipal year. So welcome everybody that online and in person. So we go to agenda item number 1, which is housekeeping actually first of all. I can pass over to Claire for the housekeeping rules, that'd be fantastic.
Thanks, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chairman in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point in front of the building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Claire. We go to the next agenda point, which is number 1 for apologies. We've received apologies from Councillor Bartlett, who's unfortunately not very well today. Councillor Aigner, who can't make us due to a family commitment. And also we've got Councillor Mike Brooks, who's running late due to traffic. Okay, substitute members. I don't believe we have any now, do we? Oh, and Nigel.
Sorry,
Nigel.
Yes, Nigel Hedges is substituting for the Conservative group. We also have Councillor Clark, who's joining us.
Yeah, I'm substituting for Councillor Iengo. You were, Mr. Chairman, it may not have got you, but I'm so substituting. I believe I've been accepted. Thank you.
You have, yeah, joining remotely, so thanks, Jude.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we can just move to agenda item number 3, which is declarations of interest. Does any members have any items they want to declare? If I can go first, I've got one. The climate report mentions the leisure centres. I'm involved in the management of some of those buildings. If I can declare that. Councillor Rigby.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's just for transparency. When we're talking about the climate papers, I'm a director of a community energy cooperative and also owner of a sustainability consultancy. Neither of which are doing any work with BCP, but for transparency.
Thanks, Councillor Rigby. Just move on to the minutes of the last meeting. I've had a look at those. I didn't see any issues with them. I've not heard from any members with any concerns. I think we'd be happy to sign those off with everyone else's. Great. Yeah, thank you. So public issues. No public petitions have been received, but we've actually got 4 public questions. And we've got Ms. Susan Chapman here that would like to read out a question. So over to you, Ms. Chapman.
Thank you. Good evening. Targets are out of date and the urgency for action before climate collapse is not happening at the breakneck speed required. Media, politics, the law and the police are suicidally, environmentally inactive. The Environment Agency warned in October the 13th, 2021 that we must adapt or die. But citizens are not being educated, incentivised and motivated to salvage and survive. Activists are now leafleting a flyer. Should the young just shut up and die? BCP alleges that children will flourish, but what is their evidence in view of failure to decarbonise at speed and scale and as the world of nature unravels? Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Ms. Chapman. I think Councillor Green, I think you've got a response.
Oh, well, actually, Chairman, I cannot get onto my internet, which is where I have it now. But Mrs. Johnston does have the reply that I have put together. Are you able to read that out? I do apologise. I've said my internet is not available at the moment.
So we're just getting it. Apologies for the delay, folks. Just a few seconds.
Okay, so this is a response from Councillor Mike Green, the portfolio holder. Sorry, just trying to find it.
Yes, Claire. Did a great job under pressure.
Okay, tackling climate change continues to be an unprecedented global challenge. And through our climate and ecological emergency ambitions, we have a solid foundation from which we are continuing to strive to make a real difference. At this meeting, members of the Place Overview and Scrutiny Board are presented with a new draft climate action strategy for discussion. This will aim to ensure that the actions being taken will reduce the impact of climate change and its effect on residents, businesses and organisations, as well as our natural environment and biodiversity in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole.
Thanks for picking that up, Claire. Okay, thanks, Councillor Green. Okay, and thanks for your question, so thank you. We've also got another 3 questions from Miss Elizabeth Elwick, who unfortunately can't make it tonight. So we will make sure that her 3 questions are answered to in writing, as soon as possible. So thanks, folks. Okay.
They're online.
Yeah, they will be published after the meeting, but the protocol in the Constitution is that responses are provided in writing to those. But they are available in hard copy as well if you'd like them.
I have requested myself a written copy, please, of my answer. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, we'll make sure you get that. So we
Thank
really appreciate the time you've taken to come here tonight.
Yes.
So we know how passionate you are about these issues. So thank
It's
you.
not good enough. This passion isn't going to do it.
We've just a slight change in the agenda item now due to availability. So we're going to move to agenda item which is number 7, which is the climate programme. So I can just pass over to Councillor Mike Green to kick this item off, and we'll go from there. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Thank you, members. Yeah. Right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the item, and then we have officers here who will also support it.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, sorry, could I use, why are we changing the agenda programme? Why are we going to 7?
It was just a request that I've agreed with the joint availabilities of the portfolio holder. So thanks, Councillor Butt.
I respect that, Mr. Chairman, but I'm extremely tight for time. I substituted thinking 6 would be first, but obviously your decision. Thank you for your advice, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, sorry about that, Councillor Butt. In hindsight, perhaps I should have contacted you, early before that. So apologies that I missed that.
Oh, it wasn't an admonishment, Mr. Chairman, but thank you.
Councillor Green, sorry.
Thank you very much. So Matt Montgomery and Neil Short will also be involved in this item. So I will introduce it, and then I will ask Matt to give us some more information about the detail of it before we move into general discussion and questions, if that's all right, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thanks,
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask, could we have the surnames of these officers? I don't know them.
So
Councillor
Matt
Green.
Montgomery is there, and Neil Short. Thank you. Well, I think where I'm going to start from is that I think we have established entirely about the importance of the climate agenda for the council and for the area. So I'm not going to spend the time on that if you don't mind. I think it's we all talk in significant terms at council. And I don't think there's a need to repeat that here. What we're here to do is to look at how we ourselves as BCP Council are going to be doing our bit in tackling that climate change. So it's very much more on a business side than anything else that we've looked at. And hopefully you have all received the changes which have gone forward in the papers which are going to cabinet, but there is the need really is to discuss things here, and then we will move on to cabinet later. The format of the climate report is different this year, in that now we are looking at a sort of 3-volume package, and I hope that people see that there's been a very significant advance this year in how we are looking at climate change, how we are tackling it, and how we intend to tackle it in the future as we move towards our twin aims of carbon neutrality for our council operations by 2030 and for BCP area as a whole by 2050 at latest. There are within the 3 items within the package, we still have the look back report, which is the annual report. That is Appendix 1, and what that does is examines our activities and advances over the last year as far as it can. That's actually quite difficult for 3 particular reasons. The first is, while it's quite easy for us to measure the carbon activities of BCP Council, or get increasingly easy because of the measures that we put in place to do so and to audit it, it's considerably more difficult to get the data for BCP area as a whole, and for that reason, the report looks at what has been achieved from 2021 to 2022 for BCP Council, but the figures that you have in front of you in the report for BCP area as a whole lag a long way behind, and we're looking at the move from 2019 to 2020. The second reason why it's so difficult is because of the influence of COVID and the pandemic. So to compare year on year is a difficult thing to do as we come through that. And it doesn't just work in the one direction that you would expect. For example, of course, during the pandemic, we had far fewer people in the office for BCP activity. But at the same time, we had to keep all the windows open to ventilate, and that actually led to an increase in heating in the BCP offices when you'd have expected it to be a decrease. And the third reason it's so difficult is because of potential methodology changes. And in this case, there has been a very significant one when looking at the overall emissions of BCP Council area as a whole. And that is particularly what is identified in the update to the Cabinet papers. Because you will see when you look at the figures, the bare figures, that we see considerable progress in the move to 2030 net zero for council activities, being down by 22% from 2019 to 2022. However, when you look at the progress we've made towards the 2050 target of net zero for BCP Council, for BCP area as a whole, the headline figure is that there's been a 3% decrease in carbon emissions, from 2017 to 2020, which, although heading in the right direction and probably just about on an acceptable trajectory, is not a great advance. But when we go into the detail and we see the methodology change, about which we can talk more later, on a like-for-like basis, there has been a 12% fall in emissions across the BCP area. Now, while that may be something to celebrate, again, we've got to look at the fact that we're talking here about the period of 2017 to 2020, a period of which we ourselves as BCP Council have had very little influence. So we are still waiting to see what the effects are of the actions that we put in, particularly since we declared our climate and ecological emergency in 2019. The report contains many of the actions that have taken place in the last year. This is the annual report, part of it. And I would just like to highlight three of them, which I'm particularly proud. The first is the adoption of the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, and the aim for that reduction in journeys that are taken by private car, and an increase in the number that will be taken on foot or by pedal or by scooter or wheeling over the course of the next few years. The second is the insulation scheme that we've introduced, which I regret has not had the take up that we would want, because it still appears to be, as far as I can tell, the most generous that is available across the whole country. And I think we all agree that in tackling carbon emissions, the first thing to do is to try to reduce the carbon emissions on stuff that's already there, and particularly if we can do so in a way which is going to save not just carbon, but money for our residents at the same time. And the third action that I'd like to bring up is the establishment of the Green Futures Fund, where we have £20 million, which is going to be available for the right sort of capital projects over the course of the next 4 years. And we are already starting to use that money, but I think is going to be an incredibly important part of our journey as we go forward as a council. The annual report also introduces the idea of 9 themes of climate change, and I'll speak to that about that a little more later, if I may. The second volume in the package is the Climate Action Plan, and like previous incarnations, what it does is it details the actions that we're intending to take over well, imminently, really. In this case, we're looking though at a time frame fixed for the next 2 years as we do so. And what you'll see is that we expect this to be a live document which will be refreshed at least on an annual basis. And I would always expect that it will have a 2-year time frame for actions as we go forward, because those should be actions that we are relatively certain that we will be able to carry out, and that we will be able to identify what the effects of those will have. And so what you will see in each of these, in the table that's written out in the action plan this time, is we have a number of extra columns as well. First of all, it identifies whether the action itself is intended to address our 2030 target for BCP Council, or our 2050 target latest for BCP as an area, or both. But also, for the first time, and I think this is incredibly important to do it this way, it starts to include some metrics by which in future annual reports we will be able to judge whether we have been successful, fully successful in that carrying out that action, whether we have been partially successful, or whether we have not been successful in doing so. And I think that will give us a huge amount of extra information which will be invaluable as we go forward. It also identifies the lead service within the council that we would expect to be responsible for this, and the whole purpose of that is to ensure that things are not allowed to, or actions are not allowed to fall through the gaps, where somebody believes it's somebody else's responsibility to be leading on it. Certainly we're all going to be involved in it, and all departments will be involved, but I think it's right that we identify again, a particular lead service for this. And what it starts to do with this, and this is where I see the big difference between what we've been looking at in the past and where we are now, is that it's introducing a discipline so that we are ensured that those actions are actually going to take place. And I'm going to come back to that in just a second as well. It also identifies in that table the themes that we believe will be involved or will be influenced within it, the climate themes, which we'll be talking about just in a second on the draft strategy. And what I think, I hope that the members of the member support groups that we have, and a number of them are here in this meeting, that I hope that they will recognise is these are ideas that have come out of those member support groups. The idea that we should start to identify who will be responsible, that we should identify how they will be responsible, and that we should identify too that we need some metrics to determine whether we have succeeded or whether we haven't succeeded, or partly succeeded, as we go through each one. And these themes are actually based on those member support groups, but with an expansion to them, as you see. So we now have 9 of them, which again I'll come to in the climate strategy, but that is where they have grown out of. And I would at this point like to thank the members of those groups, because I think that has been a tremendously good way of working together cross-party to all feed in and to influence the way that we are tackling climate change. And I believe that each one of those groups has advanced our way of doing it in a way that it wouldn't have done had that group not existed and had not existed with those constituent members. But the one important column that I feel is missing, and again this comes directly from those member support groups, but very much the way that I have wanted to see it, is that there should be, against each of these actions in future iterations, a carbon saving identified, an actual figure for the number of tonnes of carbon we expect that the action will save each year. And that becomes more important as we look on to the third and new element of these three volumes, and that is the introduction of an overarching climate strategy, which we believe should govern the way that we all go about doing our business as a council, and indeed extending into the area as a whole. If you look on, if I can just draw attention to a couple of pages on that one, on page 7, you'll see of the report. I'm afraid I don't know what page it is of the pack itself, but once you get to the climate strategy, page 7 is called Embedding Climate Action Throughout the Organisation. And we've spoken for many years, both as BCP and as our predecessor councils, about climate change being at the heart of what we do. What we've never actually done is to demonstrate how we're going to do that and give other people the opportunity to be able to test us against our strategy, to check that we are actually doing what we say that we're doing. And so that page 7 talks about embedding climate action throughout it. Going on to the next page, the climate strategy, it identifies the 3 strategic aids. So as well as the 2 that I've already been referring to make BCP Council its operations carbon neutral by 2030, and work with a wider community to make the area carbon neutral before the UK target of 2050, it also introduces, for completeness, the strategic aim 3, to help our area reverse the ecological decline and to be prepared for and resilient to the impacts of climate change. And I think that does bring in the biodiversity element, particularly, and the adaptation elements that were missing from our previous aims. And establishing those aims as part of strategy, I believe, is the way that we should move forward. Together with those aims, and on the next page, we have what we hope will be SMART goals. And again, you'll see within each of those 3, again, I don't want to use the word themes again, but I think I sort of have to, of climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and ecological recovery and restoration. We do have some particular goals that we will require to meet, and those are identified on that page. Those I would see as being certainly the silver threads that run through this. Will they be adapted in the future? Possibly. I think there's every chance that they will remain in place until we actually achieve those carbon neutral goals in the future. And then we come more onto the themes that I referred to in each of those other 2 documents as well. And I'll just list them if I may. These are open to discussion and will be when we put this strategy forward for further engagement. But I think they are, at the very least, a very, very good start. And I think quite possibly we will end up with these nine themes. So they've come out of the member support groups, so we've thought very carefully about what to include. And they are people and communities, business and economy, digital and smart places, transport and travel, water resources and flooding, energy generation and use, buildings and homes, resources and waste, environment and place. And I believe that those are likely to be the most important ones. As we develop actions around to address those themes, and within those themes, we also need to understand that each of them would require considerable resource. And so also in this draft strategy, we have the ways that we will assess those to determine whether those actions should be included. And the assessments that we are proposing will be the impact on carbon emissions, the cost versus the outcomes, the funding sources that are available or might be available, resources and capacity, which will be not just on financial side, but human resources particularly, and the risk of certainty of the outcome, or the possibility of certainty of the outcome. The draft report then goes on with considerably more detail, summarising those themes and going further into them as to how we will be able to use those themes to achieve our 3 strategic aims. It also includes at the moment the latest area of performance, the recent highlights that are going on and what we're expecting in the very near future. So that again is a crossover with the look back annual reports and the action plans that we'll have for the future. Now, whether they end up remaining in the strategy or whether it's something that we look to update in the strategy year on year or every couple of years, I don't know. That will be up to whoever's looking after it in the future. But I think it probably is a sensible way to start. What is missing from this draft strategy, the fundamental one that is missing, and for me, the whole reason for it is that each of these 9 themes, accompanying each of these 9 themes, we will expect to have a roadmap. And that roadmap, and I know again a number of people in this meeting have spoken about that in the past. And what I would expect to be on those roadmaps are the carbon savings for those that are carbon related that we would expect to have achieved at each milestone date as we go forward to those 2030 and 2050 deadlines. Now, it would be quite easy just to put in a straight line for each of those to assess roughly how much of our current carbon emissions are responsible or primarily responsible within each of those themes, and just to put in a straight line. And that would have allowed us to present a strategy for going out to the public engagement and be able to go on from there. However, I was not happy to do that. I feel that there is considerable value in having a lot more internal involvement from members and from services into ensuring that we have a better trajectory than just to say we're going to do this by a straight line. There will be certain parts of it where we know that we will be able to achieve faster than straight line, and I would not want for us to come out with something which is underachieving where we can reasonably get to. There will be others where we know that squeezing out the last few thousand tons or a few tons is going to be that much more difficult or that much more costly. So I believe that more time is needed for us to be able to draw sensible trajectories. There may also be a requirement as we go forward to look at one overall carbon fall for each to the 2030 and 2050, which these themes will have to add up to, but that may be introducing just that too much rigidity to be able to do it. So I'll leave that to those who are going to go forward with this to do that. But there is another really key element to those trajectories which ties this into the other 2 documents. And this for me is absolutely key. In those future iterations of the action plans, as I've said, I would expect there to be carbon figures which are explicitly stated in there. I will then expect that those actions, the carbon assessment of those actions, will correspond and will add up to the requirements we have on those 2 trajectories to get to 2030 and 2050. at latest. And the onus will then be on the organisation when it comes up with its and it revises its new action plans annually or at more frequently if that's what's required, to ensure that those actions will add up to the carbon savings we require on the overall trajectories that come from the carbon strategy. And if they do not, then the answer is we do not have enough actions which will do it, or that those actions need to be taken further. And this, for me, is where it all now ties together, because it becomes a discipline from which we cannot deviate. The actions feed into the climate strategy, which will dictate the speed at which we are progressing to those net zero targets. The annual report will be able to look back at those actions and determine how successful we have been and whether we need to accelerate as we go forward to be able to do so. I'm pretty much going to leave it there. Sorry, I've spoken for longer than I expected to, but I hope that people will see that this is more about structure and discipline at the moment than it is about the individuals. I don't think it's going to take very long to add in. We already do have the action plans. We are looking back at the annual reports, and we do have both targets in place and achievements that we have recorded. But I do think that it will make a considerable difference to have that structure in place that we have to subscribe to. So the idea that we'll have on this is that it will go to Cabinet purely for noting the progress. There will then be a period of a number of months to be determined where members and lead services get to feed in to those carbon milestones, which I would suggest are 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, 7 year, 10 years, something like that. But again, that's open to discussion. And then it will move forward, where I would then expect it to go back to Cabinet and the new Cabinet for agreement that is the draft strategy that will go forward. I think it will probably then should go to full council to ensure that we have that full buy-in, and then it will go out for a wider engagement before it will come back in, be amended as necessary, and be finally adopted by the council as the final strategy that will take us forward. So I hope I've given a good introduction to that and how I all see it fitting together. I don't know whether maybe Matt can give us a bit more details before going on to members, but up to you, of course, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor Green. That's a very detailed introduction. So, Matt, if you've got anything to add, I mean, that'd be great. But if not, we could bring you in as questions coming from members. It's entirely in your prerogative.
Thank you. Mike's just done a very comprehensive and great job at introducing it. The only thing I would add is the timing that we currently have. We are at a very fortuitous time in that we have elections coming up and we have committed to readdressing our big plan and corporate strategy. One of the reasons why we didn't try to take this document into a final proof was because we saw that opportunity to make sure that we can integrate it properly into the refresh of those strategies, so that this is embedded within what we do as an organisation. This isn't an add-on, this isn't a bolt-on, this is how we're going to get there. So that's the only other part I'd mention at this stage. I think Mike has said so many things about the strategy as a whole there and the documents that I won't add any more, but here to answer the questions as and when it will help.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. I've got quite a comprehensive list of speakers at the moment. I know we've got a Councillor Slade waiting online to come in. If I can start off with the councillors in the room at the moment, then we go to Councillor Hadley first and to Councillor Slade. So, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Councillor Green. I guess for me, we've had a really difficult time because we had an almost unanimous agreement across council that we felt this was an emergency and really worth focusing a lot of effort on. And then we had the pandemic, and that slid things sideways, and it feels like we've gone sideways quite a lot. And I didn't have a chance to review the +3 iteration. I think it's actually doing us a big disservice, unfortunately, to get documents so late. I spent the whole of the day reading through the previous version. I just didn't even get to it. But the key themes are good. I think that's sensible. I think one of the key things that's missing, and you've sort of done a bit of scrutiny on your own document in terms of some of the things that are missing. But I think that going beyond that, there's something about baseline and about our current performance, and in the annual plan. So there are elements that are highlighted, and it talks about the smart technique, which is about measurable and realistic targets, and yet we haven't got that, and we haven't got the sort of progress. So it talks about training for councillors and staff, and there was some training from Matt himself that for councillors, I don't know how many of us turned up, but there was also a question about should that be part of the core training that new councillors get as they come in. So I think there's something about showing what we've actually done, but also showing our ambition. And it goes back all the way for me back to Agenda 21 in about 1999 or so, was what does the world look like? So if we get to our target, if we have a real ambition to get to a 2030 target and 2050 target, what does that look like? And working backwards and trying to make sure they meet in the middle. So as you were suggesting, that overall graph, what does that look like in terms of progress? But actually, are we going to miss those targets by a country mile because we've been concentrating on things that in some cases we were already doing, and things that for me are slightly tenuous in terms of what difference does it make? So smart places suggest that's going to make a real difference to video conferencing. We're doing lots of video conferencing. We're doing it tonight. How much of that is actually down to the fibre we put in the ground, and how much of it is down to the work of others? So I think we have to be honest about some of our achievements and where we've got to. What else did I have? The actions dictate speed. Again, for me, it's the ambition that needs to dictate the actions that dictates the speed. So I think starting with the actions is probably the wrong thing. It should be about what's our ambition to actually get there. And Mrs. Chapman came and reminded us of the urgency, the importance of what we're doing, and she does it so many of our meetings. And to all councillors, in between meetings, we get lots of correspondence from her, and it's really she's very passionate, and it's really important stuff. We can talk about ice melt, we can talk about loss of species and those sorts of things. We can talk about the loss of the beach and the flooding and the impacts within BCP, which are very real. And so getting to that 2050 target, I think we have gone backwards, or we haven't gone forwards in terms of the wider 2050 ambition, because we haven't been out there pushing it hard enough. And actually, we do need to be honest with the public. And section 5, I think, of the section 6 talks about the global challenges. And I think that's a very good chapter in terms of what are we actually dealing with here. So I think to talk about our own actions, you start your introduction with saying, don't repeat the need. We do need to repeat the need, I think, in simple terms for the public. The world is burning. You're getting much more extreme weather. There are risks to life in our area if you don't change what you do. And that's, people need to hear that, because we did, with the pandemic, people did change their lives radically for a short while. And we've known that climate change is a much bigger challenge for all of us that we need to get to. So I think it's a start. I'd love to say it's a good start. I'm not sure it is. I think it's a start, and I think that's something that we really need to build on. I hope I've given a few other points. There are some details, but I think that's enough from me at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting points there, and things to add in. But I think what Councillor Green was saying earlier on, that a lot of it comes down to discipline, how we're disciplined as individuals and as an organisation, as embedding that, as you mentioned, with inductions for councillors and new colleagues coming on board from the council teams, is getting that culture in from all of us, which after this strategy obviously takes a step forward in doing that. So I think for Councillor Slade, can we bring? Yeah, of course, Councillor Green. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Thank you very much. I think I'd just like to pick out a couple of things from which that Andy spoke about, and I think which obviously all that Andy's spoken about is important, and I have to say, basically all I agree with. We all know that with the intervention of the pandemic, we did not make as much progress as we wanted. I think the difference that we're introducing here, and again, I'd like to thank those who have contributed to it, is, as the chairman's just been saying, what we are doing here is we are introducing that discipline. And that means, I think, Andy, that we have to be honest. Once we have those numbers in place, and you're right, I have scrutinised my own paper, and I was expecting to find it lacking, because I knew the main thing that I believed was lacking, and I also knew that we couldn't get there and do justice to it with a timetable, because there was a suggestion that what we should do is just present the annual report, present the action plan, and we'll just put the strategy back. What I wanted to do was to put it on the table now, to say this is where I believe that we need to get to on this strategy to make it work, and to make it watertight, and that's what the whole thing is about. I'm not quite sure about, well, maybe we are talking about exactly the same thing. We're talking about that when the ambitions should dictate the actions, not the other way around. I'm by no means saying that the actions should dictate what comes around. What I'm saying is that because we have our ambitions for the carbon savings, we have to make the actions fit that. So the return part of it is that we have to add up what those actions will do and give a tick or a cross about whether they are hitting that ambitious overall reduction or not. And as I said earlier, if they are not hitting it, then we need to find bigger actions which will make sure that we do it. And that's part of the, that is the discipline that comes in. And lastly, yes, I absolutely agree that we need to repeat about the need to do this to the public. What my point was, and maybe I didn't make it well, was that I don't think to this meeting we need to spend time talking about that. We've got bits and pieces to look at rather than speeches to make.
Thanks, Councillor Green. Councillor Slade, if you're online.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate you bringing me in. I at first just want to say I think this is a much better document than we had a year ago, so it's definitely going in the right direction, and I think it's really useful to acknowledge where there are some failings. A couple of very tiny things. Can somebody explain why our literage of diesel has gone up if if the amount of commuting has gone down and the amount of electric vehicles and HVO has gone up? How have we used more diesel? I'm confused by that. That's just a technical question. So let's come back to that. There's a couple of other small things about the climate partnership, which is apparently launching in early 2023. Well, we're now in the third month. There's nothing about it in here. We don't know who that involves. We don't know, I don't know who's been invited. I think it's a shame that that's not here for scrutiny so that we can have some input into whether that partnership is the right partnership, whether it's involving the community enough, and how different type. There's something about stakeholders in the actual action plan, but to me it's about more than stakeholders. There's nothing in here about working with specialist groups, nothing about Friends of the Earth or any of the other special interest groups that have worked so hard for so many years, and it feels like they've been frozen out. I've done several events with Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, Extinction Rebellion in the last few months, and they're all saying, well, nobody's coming and talking to us, nobody's inviting us to the table. And that feels like a shame that there's no acknowledgement of them anywhere in the strategy. And as it is only a draft, it would be great if we could build on that a little bit. And the other thing which I think is a shame, page 182 of the papers, I think it's a bit too weak on planning. The language, and Mike, you said something about there being a new version. I can't find a new version that's got any metrics and dates and things on, so apologies if I've got the wrong thing, but I've looked on the website as well as on Modern.gov. But on page 182 of the papers, the reference to planning is ensure we realise opportunities to catalyse low carbon development through the local plan and big plan. I know for a fact that there's one unitary authority that has recently included in their local plan a requirement that all new builds are net zero. So if they can do that, and it's Bath and North East Somerset, a Lib Dem led council, they've got it in their local plan. It's got through their local plan. It passed all of its criteria. I think catalyse opportunities is a little bit wishy-washy in comparison. I think we can do much better than that, Matthew and Neil. You know, do better. And the one area that is missing completely is food. Now, I have had more emails in the last 6 months about the plant-based treaty than anything I've had since badger culling. And I am really attracted by it. I'm not a vegetarian, I never will be vegetarian, but I think we should be doing more about food. And I would like to see us look at an impact assessment of what would happen if we did go towards more plant-based options. Doesn't need to be something we sign up for as like, you know, everyone has to be a vegan, but actually it is a huge impact, and it could also have a really positive impact on our food waste and our refuse because we can compost more stuff. So perhaps could we look at whether there's a space for that? And the one last thing I want to say about is the website. I am so frustrated. I understand we're no longer doing 100% green energy because the cost went up so dramatically high, and I accept and I totally understand that. Our website still says that we're using 100% green energy. That's not true. Also, all of the pages about climate emergency, if you Google it on our website, they're all out of date. You've still got the 153 points, which was abandoned years ago. All of the actions are about 3 years old. Somebody needs to take responsibility for our website being accurate. Otherwise, there's no point having strategies because no one will trust them because you look it up and the information is wrong. So this is a really good piece of work. I just think by the time the strategy comes through, not as a draft, it would be great if it was just had the edges knocked off of it.
No, I think you may have stolen, not stolen, it's not the right word to use. You preempted a few questions there, so so well done with that. I'm not sure. It's probably, I think, bring Councillor Green and then probably Matt. Then, Matt, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
I will ask Matt and Neil to answer a couple of the detailed on ones, and actually I'm just going to go through them one by one, and I'll refer at this point as whether I'd like to ask Matt and Neil, and then we'll come to them afterwards, if that's okay. The litrage of diesel that's gone up, I was under the impression it was because of the massive differential that opened up between HVO and diesel. But again, if I'm wrong, then Neil or Matt will be able to tell me in just a moment. I'll also ask Matt to speak about the climate partnership members, which I think actually are in. Certainly, one of the drafts we were including the sort of people that we would want to be involved in that, but there will of course be there'll be opportunities for others to make suggestions. I'm not sure whether I share Councillor Slade's enthusiasm for including within our strategy, particularly some of the specialist groups. While there has been a lot of work done, I think we are very keen not to politicise, and that it may not inspire some of the people, the main carbon producers, to be involved if they feel that that's the way it's going to go. But again, there are discussions to have about that. I don't accept the criticism on planning, and the reason for that is it points out very clearly, as indeed you've suggested, both the local plan and the big plan are going to be coming for refresh, and that's where the strategy is saying that these need to address the strategy that we have here and to make sure that they are in line with the strategy. And I believe that is, I would expect, now whether the local plan in the end goes for full net zero of all new developments or whatever it is a subject to be discussed as we go forward within those two plans. And it may be what this is identifying within this climate strategy is that is the place to do so. So I think that is fair. I'm not going to speak about the food in particular, but I do think that within the adaptation part of this, that there is certainly at least more than throwing a glance towards those lifestyle choices which can influence climate. But again, Matt or Neil maybe want to speak a little bit more, and I there's nothing to say on the website except that, yeah, it should be kept up to date if it possibly can be. To me, the priority needs to be on getting those measures in place, getting that trajectory in place, and getting that discipline in place. And that's what I'm hoping to try to do here. But if Matt and Neil could join in, that would be great.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, Matt, can I bring you in there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with the diesel comment. The diesel's gone up because we've insourced a few of the services that were previously outsourced. And one of the things that we want to get much better on this year is understanding where the carbon emissions are in our scope 3 emissions, and that's in our procurement. Unfortunately, they were previously in a procured service, and so we didn't have sight of them. So at the moment, it looks like they've gone up. In reality, they've gone down, but we can't quantify it that effectively. With the local climate partnership, you're absolutely right. We should have been more exhaustive and comprehensive about explaining what that is. I can give you a bit of detail about that at the moment. What that was is strategic and significant organisations of the BCP area. So people like Lush, Bournemouth University, I've forgotten the rest of them off the top of my head. All of those who have either a big spend, big energy use, or they have a big staffing base. And the rationale for bringing them together is that we all have 2030 commitments of one type or another, and we're all struggling to get there because of various non-technical barriers that are in our way. So the rationale for bringing those groups together was to try and then attack some of those barriers, things like planning, funding, how we collaborate, how we share, how we govern resources across the area, so that we can then accelerate all of our transitions towards net zero. At the moment, we're competing quite a lot for things like resources, things like PV, and we wanted to try and take that competition out and collaborate more instead. It wasn't launched this month as I was hoping it would be, because I'm afraid I've been off sick, but it is hoping to be launched very soon. I have to get back in touch with some of the stakeholders and make sure that they are on board. However, that is not a comprehensive group of stakeholders. At the moment, it's been a relatively hand-selected. We do want to open up membership to every organisation within the community, and we have been working with lots of businesses, small to medium enterprises, to help them on that journey as well. So there's a number of different actions we've been doing with them, but we will make it more inclusive going forward, and that would include the special interest groups. And I can understand the various different opinions about how to utilise passion and involvement in those contexts, but I absolutely think if we're going to get there as a region, we all need to get there together, and that does mean utilising each other's strengths wherever we can. So that's what we do need to do. One of the things that I'd like to be able to take forward with that is as we start looking at our corporate strategy and the big plan, is that's how we start getting more and more input into those processes and make them more collaborative, so that we do get that opportunity for stakeholder buy-in. I totally agree with you in the local plan. That is a loose statement. However, as Mike did say, we are doing that work within that space. We did just have a conversation yesterday about Baines and Cornwall and some of the other areas, and we have taken all of those best pieces of legislation from elsewhere, and we are going to bring them forward. One of those groups we're going to bring them forward to, that we just agreed yesterday, was with the developers and house builders, and invite them into a sustainable construction working group to talk about the local plan and the things that we need to do in it. We've got the supplier skills, capabilities and experience to actually deliver the things that we need out the other side. That will need to be done within the next few weeks to months, because we for the timetable of the local plan, was absolutely critical to getting the local plan adopted as well, because the planning inspector will want to see that. I agree with you with food, but I agree with you from a resilience and adaptation perspective more than a climate emissions perspective. I do think that's going to be one of the most disrupted parts of our economy going forward, and we're already seeing that just recently. I don't think that's going to get any better. I think it's probably going to get worse. Our food's probably going to get more expensive, and we need to have a resilient local food supply to do that. And so I would like to prioritise that too. You're right, it's not properly brought out in the document at the moment. And the website, yes, 100% agree with that too. It needs updating. As I'm sure you're aware, there's been quite a lot on the organisation's backlog at the moment. And so it is there, and it is listed in our action plan of things that we'd like to get done. But absolutely, for communication, for collaboration, from integration, inclusivity perspective, yeah, we have to have it there to help people understand what's going on, where they can get involved and what they can do, to give a bit of reassurance that we are actually doing stuff as well. So thank you very much for all of those points. And just to reinforce Councillor Green's point, I think we really wanted to open this out and get all of these comments in so that we can get this to a point with the cabinet where we are happy with this, and we as a region can be proud that we know what we're doing and that we've got a good plan to get there. So so please don't hold back for the next however long we have. I would really like to get as many comments in as possible.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Councillor Slade. There was a lot of questions there, but quite a lot of answers as well. So, are you happy with that? Okay. Oh, thank you. If I can move on to Councillor. Oh, so Millie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I also really love reading this. I like the way it's set out. It's very digestible, and it has lots of really, really good points, especially the things that people can do. I think it's those sort of actionable things that where someone can look at this and think, oh, well, actually, I do boil a full kettle when I make a cup of tea. But you know, one of the things which I was very keen on last time was getting that climate risk assessment done. And you can see in this as well that those sort of feed in around mitigating against those risks, which is really useful. Obviously, last year there were some really extreme impacts of climate change, droughts, named storms, heat waves, that kind of thing. But I worry a little bit about the responsibility of some of the priorities in particular. Local authorities are obviously complicated organisations. Many of the plans will really require buy-in from partners, industries, service providers, all sorts of stakeholders. And it's not just sort of that corporate or that cultural buy-in, it's like literally money. There's a huge amount of the priorities that require, literally billions of pounds of infrastructure investment, especially around sort of coastal erosion, flooding, that kind of thing. So, for example, one of the priorities is improved flood alleviation for community areas that flood. Which is very easy. It looks very easy when it's in a sentence like that, but that's literally something which is going to cost millions of pounds to be able to increase the capacity of things like where this water will go and how we will deal with it. And I don't sort of see government coming up with solutions. I don't see water companies chipping in, and I think I just worry about where the responsibility lies in tackling those sorts of issues, because if we're all sort of waiting for each other to do something about it, then it just won't get done. So yeah, it's just sort of to get an idea of how we tie in with other organisations on the strategy. Thanks.
That's an interesting question. Yeah, Councillor Green.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, it is an interesting question, and it is a very valid one, because it particularly recognises that we as a council do not have the power to introduce these. And I'm just going to turn it back a little bit to the one area where Matt and I have had a little bit of a difference in the past, and that comes to the climate partnership. This is the reason that I believe that there should be a leadership group, which are the biggest influencers, and it's those who would be. So here we are talking about the universities, JP Morgan, the big influencers on how much carbon, either directly or indirectly, that we've got. And it's that leadership group that I believe then will be interacting with the agencies that Councillor Earle has correctly identified have to be involved. So it can't be just us as a council. It does have to be a more substantial climate leadership partnership. But I see there as being at least two different levels of the engagement outside. And I see that that leadership group as being a fairly small group of people who are there to make sure that they will get things done and will have the ear of government and other agencies. I then also, where I do agree with Matt and with Councillor Slade, is there is then also the requirement to bring in a much wider group of those that are interested and are either because they're interested, or because they're active, or because they ought to be interested and active, and to have that larger group feeding in to the ideas to the leadership group, which is probably facilitated by the council, but may not even be led by the council. So that's the way that I see it working.
Thanks for that, Councillor Green. Matt, would you anything additional to add to that?
Yes, a few things, if you wouldn't mind. First of all, I suppose there is a shared responsibility for adaptation planning across the region. It typically comes down from a national top-down perspective. We have the National Adaptation Programme that lists a number of organisations which they assign adaptation reporting powers to. They are typically the utilities and infrastructure companies and public sector bodies. So amongst all of those groups, we all hold responsibility for adapting our infrastructure to the climate risk that comes at us. And in a number of those infrastructure sectors, work has been underway for decades. And every time a new road is built, a new set of requirements for the types of flooding or the types of heat they need to be built to withstand is increased or improved in some ways. So there is a lot of work that's already been going underway. What we haven't done very well in this document is bring out how we're going to bring all that work together and to be clear that that risk is being managed and mitigated in the most appropriate way possible. One of the roles that we know we need to bring in, and we've been waiting for the budget to be approved so we can do so, is an adaptation plan manager who is going to take that lead role and pull those things together. Part of that is to make sure that the parts of our organisation are aware of the risk that are going to hit their services. And that's one of the reasons for splitting the themes into the themes the way they are at the moment, is that those are physical systems that will be disrupted. And we need to understand what the risk of that disruption is and then work with the services to ensure that they can mitigate them in some way. And then we need to work with the stakeholders, the statutory stakeholders who have a responsibility to ensure that we're all planning for the same degree of risk. At the moment, most organisations are planning for a 2-degree risk. And the UK Climate Change Risk Assessment really dictates that we need to go for a 4 degrees C temperature rise. That is really quite dramatic, and that is a really significant set of things that need to be done. So you're absolutely right. There is a hell of a lot of work to be done in preparing for the risk of climate change. But there is a lot of work that's been underway too. But what we need to do is get much better at showing where that risk lies, what we're doing about it to help people understand what is residual risk that we need communities to be able to be aware of, how we respond to emergency planning type events, and how we can work together with all these other stakeholders to start chipping away at some of those things and have good backup plans and things that we can do in the event of emergencies, because I'm afraid they probably will become more frequent.
Thanks, Matt. Councillor, is that okay? Okay, Councillor Brooke.
Fine, thank you, Chair. And first of all, just to say, in a way, congratulations to those who've produced the document so far. It's overall a very good and comprehensive view of what we've been doing, where we're at and where we're going in the future. Though, as has been recognised, I think, both by Matt and Mike and also Councillor Slade, there are gaps and things that still need doing, and we need to see those introduced, especially into the strategy. I've got I've got actually a lot of questions, but I won't actually ask them all now. I'll send some behind the scenes, I think. But I have got 1 or 2 points to make and 1 or 2 questions. Just to remind Mike that I am actually the local plan working advisory group chairman. I've not been approached at all for any information regarding the climate emergency and the development of the local plan. And when I was reading through the introductory report, which was actually just a summary sheet, point 4 makes the statement sufficiently take account of the climate and environment, the ecological emergency. To me, that really is a very, very weak statement. What does it mean by sufficiently take account of? I don't think it goes anywhere near far enough where we should be. We should be fully taking account of the emergency, and therefore it should be relating, I think, to every single aspect that you've identified, those 9 groups, those 9 strategic areas. And I'd written down housing, transport, economic development, environment, etc., without having got as far as the strategy. So I think there is an area there that really needs to be looked at, or I need to know with my group exactly where you're at with that that relationship between climate and the emergency and the local plan, because they're hoping to get the local plan out to public consultation before the end of this year for its in its final draft form. So there's a real pressure there to get that done. So grateful that Councillor Slade actually raised that point in her questions. With regard to partnerships, something I've been in communication on Twitter with BCP Council eventually, trees for streets. I noticed that we've planted over 10,000 trees in Upton Country Park, where there are many trees anyway, and it is one of our best sort of environmental areas. But look at our urban areas that are just buildings and road and tarmac and brick walls and concrete and no trees. If we really want to make an impact in greening and creating place, then we need to be planting trees of the right sort in streets where we don't have any. And that's where I was thinking in terms of a partnership between the council and Trees for Streets as an organisation. And I will be passing information on. But again, something there, I think, to look at in your partnership working, because I've seen the images where they have had an impact and it is quite dramatic, and the response by the public and the residents of those areas is, as you would expect, it improves their health, their
Sorry to
well-being.
interrupt, Councillor Brick. I think only because what you're saying is relevant. I think the Tree Working Party has actually touched on that as well. So, Councillor Farr, you might have a quick update on that. I know I couldn't be there for the whole meeting, but they did actually cover the tree planting in urban areas and that. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, it was one of that was part of what was covered. There was a full overview of the tree strategy moving forward, and it was something that was looked at. So that has been noted.
So we're sure, hopefully, all those different groups and officer groups will be linking up together with all the different strategies. But it's an important thing to mention. So sorry, Councillor Brooks, to interrupt.
Fine, thank you, Chair. And then please accept my apologies, not only for being late to this meeting, but there needs to be something done about traffic congestion and roadworks and everything else. 15-minute journeys took an hour and 10 minutes tonight, and every single road was blocked. What I'm going to ask, the other apology is I'm a bit of a data geek and a graph geek, and I'm very concerned about the one graph that features in all three documents that are presented, which in the annual report is figure 1 on page 10 and so on. You'll know the one I mean. I can't quite work out exactly how it's been constructed, as whether we've said 2019, that's where our carbon is, 2030, that's where we've to go, and if everything else is underneath that line, it means we're heading in the right direction, or whether it's meant to be a best fit curve or line, because it certainly isn't a best fit curve. If putting it on those three columns that you've got at the moment, a best fit curve would bring you down to completing in 2025, 2026, which is not a feasible one. Therefore, if you take the two averages, the averages of 2020, 2021, I know COVID was involved at that time, you'd have a very, very much shallower line, and actually we'd be nowhere near on target if we're using the statistics. So I think we've got a problem with using this graph in all those documents and saying, hey, look, we're actually on target. Because to be on target, every 3 years, you're going to have needed to reduce by 22.67% to get to 2030. And let's face it, the last 2 years has been 1.3% or 2.6% in 2021. So that graph, as it's drawn, quite frankly, is misleading, giving the wrong information, and needs to be looked at. And you need more data put onto it to be able to draw any conclusions at all. So that's my geekism coming out, and critical thing there. And one other point in terms of what we've been doing, we spent nearly 25 million on beach and coastal work, which some people will say has to be done. Other people will say some of it was unnecessary. How much was the carbon footprint of doing that work in the first instance? Because the pumping, I'm sure, was not being probably not been electrical pumps, but might have been diesel pumps driven. There were tractors, there were bulldozers, there were all sorts of machines. Has anyone measured the carbon footprint of doing that work? And secondly, from my geological and my geographical background, if you do some work in one place on the coastline, it has a knock-on effect somewhere else to balance. So if you are taking out of the sea to put onto the beach, that actually creates a change in the flow of the water, strength of the waves and everything else, and will make a change. And if you've got longshore drift, it means you're going to probably have greater erosion somewhere else where you haven't protected. And therefore, we've got to need, and this is the sort of question, should we be looking at trying to repair the coastline and do things to the coastline along its whole length, or should we actually be saying, look, we're never going to win this, we're going to be spending millions and millions and millions of pounds, and by the time we get to 2050 or 2100, actually it will have all been wasted anyway because the sea will have eroded the whole lot. So I think there's a big question there. There's actually what should our strategy be in terms of managing the sea flooding and coastal work compared with how we're looking at it now. Because I think all we've been doing at the moment is saying, oh, that needs doing, without actually thinking of the long-term impacts and the overall strategy. So those are my comments, within which I think there are questions or issues for responses.
Thanks, Councillor Britt. Councillor Green, would you like to come?
Yeah, thank you very much, John. Yeah, I'll just address a couple of those if I may. The first is regarding the input that's required from the climate strategy, whether draft or final, into the local plan. I think it is semantics. To my mind, looking sufficiently to take account of the climate strategy means looking fully, because I believe it is not sufficient unless it is full. But you know, I'm happy to see words changed to reflect the same thing. I would hope that we will be at or you will be at a full climate strategy to be taken forward and adopted before the local plan goes out at the for final consultation. So hopefully that will be able to feed in the right way. I do absolutely agree with you with the graph. I'm, as you know, a mathematician, and this is really fundamentally where I'm saying we should not just be looking at straight line graphs, and we need our trajectory to be planned out correctly, either within theme or overall, probably both. And that will then be able to, from that, we'll be able to see whether we've got the discipline right or not, and actually be able to say, yes, we are in line to be able to meet that, and putting a straight line there. I think that's where we are now. By the next iteration, I would not expect it to be anything like a straight line as far as anticipation or requirement is concerned. And just one thing about the beach works, yes, there will always be that debate about what we do, and obviously it doesn't just come down to how nice a beach we want. I remember when I was first elected, they were talking about how fine the grains of sand, should we allow it to become a bit more rough and ready? Do we want the soft golden sand because of all of these? The carbon footprint of what we've been doing should be taken account of within our scope 2 and scope 3 emissions, which we have, which we are measuring. And I will just sort of preface it a little bit. Something that should come out within a few months is it looks as though the beach replenishment side, we may have found a much better, a much more local, much more carbon efficient way of doing so. But I haven't got the details on that. But it has been identified that we will likely get some more information on that and some options coming forward in a few months.
Thanks, Councillor Green. Matt and Neil, is there anything you'd like to add to that, or are you happy?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I totally acknowledge the graph comment. Yes, that bothers all of us. I'll hold my hand up to that one. We weren't able to be confident enough in the numbers to be able to provide a better graph than that, but we hope to be able to do that in the next couple of months before this gets published. just a comment on the beaches as well. Yeah, it's a hugely complex issue. I do know that the FCERM team are working incredibly hard at getting a plan together and how we address this. The only other point I would make on that, though, is that currently the work that's done there is actually funded by the Environment Agency. And so the carbon emissions actually hold to them, and they do that as a mechanism to protect the beach. It's a cliff stabilization one, but it's not my area of expertise, so I'd have to bring in the others to help answer that in the future. But it is a high priority for that team. The other point, just to make very quickly, is about trees. The Green Infrastructure Strategy and the Trees Working Group have been working towards design guides for how we introduce trees into the urban realm. It is quite difficult, I do have to caution, because there is quite a lot of things underneath the ground that tend to be disrupted by tree roots. So what we're trying to do is integrate those design guides into the local plan. So the local plan will have those details of how best to do it, and a lot of it comes down to the integration with the highways, the integration with the flooding and the drainage channels as well, to make sure that you're not causing more problems than you're solving. But that would be the last one on that one. And so yes, but thank you very much for your comments. I do agree with all of them.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Councillor Brooke, is that okay before we move on?
Yeah, that's fine. If I can just come back on the graph and where we're trying to get to, I would have thought it's going to be much more of a steep leveling off. It's almost the converse of the or a mirror image of the population growth one, because you're doing the easy pickings now, and it's going to become harder and harder and harder to reach that percentage discount that you're going to need.
I think what we'll find is probably a lot of steps. And so what we'll have technologies which get refreshed, or transformations or swap outs that we do, and then suddenly there'll be a large drop in emissions, and then there'll be work to prepare for the next drop and then the next drop. So I think it might be more stepped than straight, but yes, it's certainly not as it's currently displayed.
No, I was just looking at even a smooth curve as a best fit would take account of the hiccups along the way.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Okay, I've just got a list of speakers now, because I fear time's moving on. So I think after the next speakers, we'll move on. So we've got Councillor Hedges, Councillor Rigby, Councillor Butt online, and Councillor Hadley to finish off with. Is that okay? I don't think I've missed anybody. Okay, so Councillor Hedges.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a substitute for this meeting, but I have been able to read the report and obviously congratulate the officers on the detail and the breadth, but I really value the opportunity to sit here tonight for overview and scrutiny. I think it's really important, and there's always something that I will learn from those sitting around me when they ask their questions. Councillor Green, we had a brief email dialogue prompted by a resident's question to me. You kindly explained, I'm trying to remember, about an air pollution safe level that you maintained that no council could beat, but you did mention that they were guidelines. Could you explain this further for my benefit, for those listening to this meeting? Because I'm really struggling to remember, because it was really important. I need your help.
I'll try to do so. Yeah, we have.
I mentioned about Wallisdown Road, didn't it? That's right.
Yeah, there are. What constantly comes up is that the World Health Organization have their guidelines for particulates and for air quality. The law, however, it has very different numbers, and what we find is that pretty much every conurbation in the country of our sort of urban density has breaches the World Health Organization guidelines by a considerable margin. In our case, unlike many of the other cities and city regions type urban conurbations, we have no breaches of the legal limits anywhere in the country, anywhere in the conurbation. But I have to point out that air quality isn't actually within my own portfolio. So that is information that I am at least able to give you.
Thank you. I apologise for that, but you got it. Thank you.
Councillor Hedges. Councillor Rigby. So it's taken a while to get to you. So
It's all right, Chair, no worries. I like going a little bit later because if people asked a few of the questions which I was going to, so it leaves me room to ask a few more, which is always nice, right? Yeah, I'm going to fly through this really quickly. I think it's fair to say at the start of this, when the administration changed from what was the Unity Alliance to this, I was concerned about the climate. I was concerned that this wasn't going to end up even coming to us in the future. And this report and what's been put together has surpassed my expectations, and I'm not quite sure if that's a compliment or not, but it has. So I'm pleased to see it. And I think one of my main concerns about this whole thing, and I think I've been always quite open and transparent about this, is that I see the climate and the action on climate as something which is beyond politics, and it shouldn't be politicised as much as possible. And what I'd really worry about seeing is a change of administration, whatever the flavour might be, after May coming in and going, oh no, we can do a better job than this, and ripping this up and trying to start from scratch again. I mean, we're 4 years down the line now from when we first declared the climate emergency. And I think this is something brilliant which we can build on. And I think the officers, Matt and your team, have done a great job of bringing it to this stage. And I think we can only build on it and improve on it from here. So that's good. But saying that, I am going to be critical, but please take it in the way that it's intended to, you know, try and improve things for everyone. So the first thing that I want to ask about, and I'm just going to kind of fly through this. I started highlighting this and then I realized I was highlighting everything. So I'm just going to go through. Mike, you brought up the Green Futures Fund, but there's nothing there in the capital projects that are outlined for what that'd be spent on. Is there any idea of what that'd be? Because I'd hate to see it sort of like flitted away on things that would get done anyway. Like we know, for example, that a load of the street lights are bust and failing and difficult to replace. And if we found a slightly more energy efficient version, could the money just disappear into that and it'd be something which needs to be done anyway? Or are these for climate tackling projects which are going to make a difference and wouldn't happen without this fund existing?
Yeah,
So
should we pick that up now? I was going to ask that question just now. So we pick that up now with perhaps with Matt first of all. Councillor Green, if you want to go first. Yeah,
I think I'm able to actually. We do have an infrastructure. Except it's just gone out of my mind what it's called. So Future Infrastructures Board, to which the bids go. For various funds, but particularly for the Green Futures Fund. We haven't identified it within this report, except if it's in some of the annual report, but that there are, I think, 4 projects that have already been funded, and they are indeed new projects. The requirement, or the idea of the Green Futures Fund is that it will become circular, and so that they should be washing their face. The project should be washing their face as they go through, but certainly having been involved in trying to push stuff through, I can absolutely assure you that that the ones that will be going into this fund will be funded by this are those that will make a significant difference. So they need to wash their face. They don't need to produce a large return. But what the fund means, whether they would have been done or whether they wouldn't have been done, it means the money is there available to say, yes, you can do it. You've got to this stage on a business case, therefore it's done. We don't need to go out and find additional funding. It has to tick the right boxes. Personally, I feel that that some of the boxes are a little bit strict because there are bids that I've been keen to go through that have not met the requirement. But I think that it does meet where you do. I'm going to come back later on what you first said, if that's all right.
Thanks.
Cool. Thanks very much. Just carrying on through then, still in the first one, the commitment to EVs and the changes to that. One thing that I keep getting asked again and again and again about is an EV strategy for chargers for residents, which is getting. I know you know that EVs are not the future of transport, but they are definitely a step change in the way that transport is happening. People want to have electric vehicles, and we should be trying to find a way which those, particularly without driveways, can get charging points for their cars. So it's something to think about. And I know it's a difficult strategy to do because running cables all over the place is tricky, but it'd be good to see something coming forward within the strategy for how that'd be supported. Where am I? Oh yeah, it's going back to the green electricity tariff as well, and it's something I found a little bit, I'm going to say a little bit cheeky in the where are we? I'm just scrolling. Let me get the right name for it. In the climate action strategy, we're asking residents to do things, and one of the suggestions is that they get a renewable energy tariff, right? And we've just said, God, it's too expensive to get a renewable energy tariff. So we are leaders, and I know it costs more. I know there's problems, and I know Matt, we've spoke about this separately about how exactly we got our renewables tariff, but I think there's a wider discussion to be had around exactly where we're sourcing our energy from and how we're sourcing it and things like that. So it's just to highlight that point, because I'm sure that'll get pulled out by residents first of all, saying, well, why should I do it if you're not doing it? And then there's some stuff which is really, really great, which I want to draw attention to, and it's things that go beyond the climate, but are really, really important. I think there's some figures in here which we've not talked about, which is the public consultation revealing how residents feel about climate and what their support is, and 95% feel that it's changing, and worried about loss of wildlife and habitats. The impact on future generations was 90% of people who were surveyed. You know, this is big numbers. So this has got support through the residents, which I think is brilliant, and hopefully they can get more involved with this if it goes up for further consultation and further feedback, and involving, like Councillor Slade said, some various groups. And I know there's also business green groups and that throughout, who I'm sure would be dying to get involved as well. Another thing that I saw that I really want to talk about, and I can't quite find it now, and you might be able to recall it.
Pick those questions up and come back.
Yeah, if you can do.
Yeah, I don't know what's to pick the one about the charging units up. Matt, do you want to go on that one? Okay.
Yeah,
Go Councillor Green.
That's definitely me, and that's around the EVs. It's a really, really complicated subject, and I do have some fairly strong views myself about it, because bluntly, the places that have no driveways tend to be the places where there is a lot of parking stress. And what it seems to be, rightly, wrongly, whatever, is that many people would like to have a parking space. And in many cases, it seems to me, and again, I may be unfair, that they are prepared to get an electric car if that means that they can have a parking space. And so what we have done, and I think for the moment it is the way to do it, is to massively increase the number of public charging points that we are making available, rapid and some fast, but mostly rapid points, which are available. The first wave of them has been in on BCP property, primarily BCP car parks. By the time this wave finishes, which should be within this summer, we should have 130 additional chargers, the public chargers that have been put in. I recognise that's not the same as having a charger at home or outside your home, but I think that overall, for me, it's the right way to do it, because if we start to allocate places outside people's homes, pretty much, then that's privatising the road, which is in scarce resource and needs to be there. I understand absolutely that there are other ways of looking at it, and I also recognise that it does make it more difficult for people who genuinely wish to make that move and to play their part. It makes it more difficult for them to do so. But overall, that's where I believe that we should be concentrating, is in the supply of rapid and very soon, I hope, ultra rapid chargers, so that people will be able to pop in and they'll do exactly the same as if they're filling out their car with a fossil fuel, and it will take them no more than 15 minutes to get to where they are.
Yes, that's agree.
If I may, I'd like to just come back on what I really welcome from Chris in talking about the way that we put this together as a cross-party arrangement, and that the administration change didn't result in the way that some other administrations around the country have unfortunately moved. I mean, I make no apologies for the fact that I am very much a turquoise Tory, and will remain that way. But certainly the way that we've had the buy-in right the way through cabinet. We've had the increase in resources, and I'm not going to go into any party political on that, but we have seen a significant increase in both capital and revenue resource going into that, into the way, and I think that it reflects that this administration, in the same way as the previous administration, sees climate change to be the absolute priority here, and I'm glad that we've been able to do it in that way. And I really would again thank the other members, whichever party they've been in, who've been able to help us in this way.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Rigby, I think you were searching for a final question there.
Yeah, just a couple more things. Thanks for that as well. I think, like you say, I think we probably would have done it in different ways, but the fact that it's getting done, and that's what's important. The bit I wanted to highlight was in the strategy on page 32 of the strategy, which is diversity and social inclusion. I just want to say that that's really, really important, and I'm really glad that that is been included, particularly the line climate change is inherently unequal, because it does impact those from ethnic backgrounds and lower social classes a lot more than it does other people. So I think including this is really, really key. Two last things. One in here, school streets, which is in here as one of the targets, and saying it's going to be rolled out further. I welcome that so much, and I can't wait to see that gets rolled out to every single school across the conurbation. I think that's really important. And the final thing, which isn't actually second to final thing, but there's something which is a bit of an elephant in the room, or two elephants in the room, which is the possibility of 2 incinerators which are coming to BCP, which could potentially blow the whole calculations and everything like that, which have been done for the wider area, out of the water. If they do go online and they do become projects which are operating here, I know they're going through planning, and as things stand, but I just want to highlight the concerns I've got around that. I don't want to go into more detail about it here, but just to bring it up and make sure it's taken note of. And the final thing is just, actually, it's a little sad, maybe a little political thing, and it's actually for Councillor Slade on the plant-based treaty. If you did sign up to it and you did tell them that you were vegan, you'd stop getting the emails, because I think I might be the only councillor who doesn't get a load of emails, and I'm probably the one who's most supportive of it. So yeah, just that, and I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Rigby. I think we've got Councillor Butt and Councillor Hadley to finish off.
Is that me, Mr. Chairman? I thought Councillor Hadley had spoken.
No, then we give the opportunity to have another question at the end. So, Councillor Butt, if you want to go ahead.
Well, I'll go very, very quickly. The report is reassuring. It's very reassuring, and that's my concern, that it is reassuring. We heard from Sue Chapman earlier about the emergency situation we're in, and how climate change is rapid, and it would seem that we've been somewhat glacial in getting here for many, many reasons, and that is my concern. There's some superb stuff in here, and lots of good ideas have come from the floor today, and contributions from everybody, which is what we want to be doing, obviously cross-party, for the benefit of everybody. But I'm just wondering, are we going to land this? We've not done much in the last 4 years. It's another brilliant document, although I have to say I'm very disappointed about the engagement part of it with regard to joining up thinking as to who's actually going to lead on this. I heard about the budget stresses, and you were waiting for budgets to be agreed before you could appoint yet another person, etc., etc., etc. But there's so much reliant on A happening and B happening and C happening, and I'm just wondering, what is the likelihood of this actual document being landed, and what flexibility is there within the document that we can keep things moving forward? We all want to work towards this, obviously, but I just have concerns that this is really, really serious, and the public pay a huge part. We all pay a huge part in landing this. I think Councillor Earl actually mentioned the fact that there's all those little things, not putting a full water of kettle, cool kettle of water on, silly little things, but the tiny things make the difference. And we need people to be on board, so we can all sit around this table and speak in very grandiose terms and have huge, long, copious reports, luckily not on paper. But I just want to know, is it possible? Is it feasible? Are we going to land this? And what are the what are the brickbats, so to speak, that are going to come up between us and landing this particular document, and can we keep it flexible? And please, can we improve on our engagement thus far, because it's a golden thread and we need to keep it continuous. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been brief. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Councillor Butt. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't quite agree that we haven't achieved very much over the last 4 years as a council. I think actually when we look at where we were when we started and where we are now, not just in terms of the documents and the strategies, etc., but the actual actions as well. I think that we have made considerable progress. Quite likely not enough progress to be able to ensure that we're on that trajectory, but significant progress nonetheless, and we've done so in a collaborative fashion. As far as engagement is concerned, there has been considerable engagement at one level. The point is at the moment that we are looking here at effectively a draft, which will then have internal work and a few stakeholders. It will then go out to much wider consultation before it comes back to us to try to get towards a final strategy. So I think that's there. And the last thing, I was going to bring this up right at the end, but actually I think it is the sensible thing to do now. I'm going to come back to the fact that what this strategy and this triumvirate of papers going forward does is to give us a discipline. And I don't think, having looked at the climate strategies of many other local authorities around the country, I don't think I've seen one that has given that same sort of structure as discipline as this one will give. So I think that's something that collectively we should be very proud of.
Thanks, Councillor Green. Okay, Councillor Butt, is that okay? I think that answers your question.
Well, you know, I think that was quite defensive, and I understand it. But it may be I was talking on behalf of the public and their perception, and I suppose we can gauge that as we go out. But I know there's a lot of people out there. I'm taking Miss Chapman's thoughts and processes. We know Miss Chapman is extremely passionate about the condition that we find ourselves in, but then so are many members of the public. And it's, if we don't know what they're feeling about climate change, then it's very difficult for us to gauge. I was not trying to be critical, Councillor Green, but I did find your response a little defensive. I wasn't per se criticising what had happened, but I do feel that no, we haven't been as quick as we could have been, and we do need to move on apace. So I'm just asking. My question was, you know, are we going to be able to land this? Are we going to be able to keep that flexibility in? And are we going to keep the engagement golden thread going through? I won't expect an answer per se to that unless the officer would like to comment, but it's not seen as a criticism. I'm trying to be a critical friend here and contribute as everybody else. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Butt. I think Councillor Green wanted to come back before we move on.
Thank you. Yes, I do really, because I'm afraid I just don't agree. I think we have been very inclusive, and we will be even more inclusive. And Councillor Rigby was clear, pointing to the sections in the report that talk about the results of engagement we have had with members of the public in BCP, extensive consultation about what the fears are for the climate, and about what our response should be. We'll then have an extra round of engagement before we move forward, and that we move forward absolutely to land this. That's where it's getting to.
Thanks, Councillor Green. Councillor Hadley, so we'll finish off with you, if that's okay.
Okay, yes, I'll try and be brief. There were a couple of points of detail I wanted to mention, but first I just wanted to build really on what Councillor Brooke was talking about in terms of street trees, because and it does. I'm on the tree working party, and I did raise there my concern, which is it's not just about trees, it's about drainage and suds and the whole bit about how we deal with water in the public realm. So we were talking about partnership, and it's not all about us. So you know, that's partly about people putting down artificial grass and impermeable surfaces in their own land, or pushing all their water out onto the street and then complaining about flooding. But it's also, if you go to places like Italy, where they're used to having inundations, they blew in great huge drainage systems, which we don't have. and it's going to take us a long time. Given the rate at which we are able to dig up the roads, it's going to take us a long time to retrofit all of our highways for the amount of water that's just landing on the highway, let alone the amount of water's coming from other places that shouldn't be. So I do think there's a whole refit, which the sooner we start on that journey, the sooner we're actually going to get to a place of greater comfort. And our teams, I'm sure, in Environment Services will know where the drainage problems really are currently, and Wessex Water will wring their hands and say it's not me, Gov, and we, there's a partnership piece we need to work on there. So I think that's really important, and some of that is. The ground is getting so wet that where we thought it was drainage, actually it just sits on the surface because it's got nowhere to go. So that's a real challenge. The bits I wanted to come back to was under council operations, and again, Councillor Rigby mentioned this briefly, but electricity consumption, we claimed a 96% reduction in our use of carbon in the action report. Clearly, that's not happened. We've had to go back on that. But at the time we went for that deal, I was really concerned because it's just a renewable obligation for one of the big companies. It's not ensuring that is properly supporting and enhancing renewables. So it'd be really useful to understand our ambition for generating ourselves, our ambition for going for local, either community or commercial farms. And I saw something that Dorset is now exporting from a solar farm to the city of London, is buying their electricity from a solar farm in Dorset. How crazy is that? So there's something about how we can make sure that investment is going into the right place, given the amount of money we spend. The other bit was around home working and the return to the office, and there was a comment in there about the degree of rebound and what that would do, because currently I think we've shifted some of our energy consumption to people's homes, to our staff's homes. They're powering their laptops and sitting, putting the heating on in the daytime because they're there rather than in our offices. That's actually probably increased rather than reduced the overall energy use because it's in 1,000 homes, whereas it was in one office. But there's something about how much we think the rebound will be and what we do about that. And we're in a leaky building, which, as the report says, it says to people, shut your windows and shut your curtains, and we haven't done that. We've got blinds open. So there's again something about what we do as an organisation against what others do. And then then I was also concerned about the HVOs, and again that's got plus 200% in the report because we've had to go back on that, and that speaks to me in terms of the move away from diesel for our fleet, the use of and it says we bought the 30 EVs, we're looking at 10 more. Well, do we need to accelerate that? That's an open question, but actually within that, I also strongly think we should be looking at, do we even need those vehicles? Can we move some of that to cargo bikes and set by example, move away from lots of people running around in big vans that are empty? So there's something about what's our true need going forwards, perhaps rather than where we've been or replacing what we've got with an electric vehicle. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, there are a couple of items on that. I mean, I'm hoping that the street trees and drainage will be taken up. There's two themes in particular: one around environment and place, and one about flooding, particularly, which I think you're absolutely right. We need to look at it in the round. We can't just try to identify one problem and solve it without reflecting on the fact on what it does outside that. And again, that's the idea of having an overarching strategy, because it allows us to be able to pull those. In fact, it doesn't just allow us to pull those together; it forces us to look at them in the round. As far as the green energy tariff is concerned, yeah, I mean we've discussed this before, Andy, but I also have great concern that all we're doing is trading in a market of renewable obligations. Then the actual effect that it has on carbon production is very limited, and that is actually one of the reasons why I was not as concerned about about us moving away from a so-called renewable tariff as a council. Once the price differential opened up, I mean, it's potentially now down to the sort of differential that you might look to get back into it. But I think there are better ways of doing so. HVO though is again, I don't want to go over the old debates, but I've been very keen in all that I've looked at, and it's in there as one of the key texts for our actions, is that we look at what the return is on carbon saved. So I am, my version of carbon accounting, if you like, to some extent, is always to look at pounds spent per carbon tonne saved, to make sure that we have, again, a discipline to ensure that we are doing things in the most efficient manner for our residents. And the way I see it in the future is that, give or take, because there's obviously got to be some flexibility in it, when we know exactly how much carbon we have to save to be on the right trajectory, then we try to do so in the most cash efficient way, but knowing that we must meet that carbon target. And that's what the whole discipline is about. And obviously, when HVO became the differential with the price of diesel became so large, it at that stage didn't become the right decision to continue with HVO instead. One other thing that I really particularly want to pick up on that you brought out is the way of looking at renewable energy and its use locally. Because you're right, the Dorset situation doesn't make much sense. Councillor Whitby and I were in a meeting this afternoon where we're looking at exactly that. Now, we do have particularly council-owned assets and some leased buildings where there is the opportunity for significantly more energy generation. And I think certainly Councillor Rigby and I both very much believe that we should be looking at ways that we can use that energy as locally as possible and try to build in some form of closed systems where there is at no stage is there a need to export that to the grid. Now, that will require some form of battery storage in many cases, but there are other ways. There are other times that we won't need to do that. There are locations within BCP, well known to all of us, where there is potential for generating local energy, and there are also high usage locations within it working 24 hours a day. So around the hospital is an obvious one, which is very, very close to the Little Down Centre. So I think it really is important to us as a council, but also within this leadership group, to be able to look at those closed systems and find a way of reducing. Basically, a win for us should be a win for our partner as well, and very much a win for carbon saving if we can get it right. So that's where I am. We want to come back. So if you don't mind, I would like to just have a couple of words at the end as well, Chairman.
Yeah, if I could, yeah. I mean, I think that your last point, and you know, for me, that goes beyond that to district heating systems, and actually, you know, going into very much collaboration with other big energy users. A lot of our operations are daytime, though. Things like the beach operation is all daytime, and we had a big panel on the Pool Civic car park, and also on the Pool Civic social care annex. So I have already asked, and I'm told that they are going to be redeployed, which is good, but they're sitting not doing very much at the moment in terms of benefiting us internally, and that bit about using your own energy. I suppose you mentioned the four topics under Green Futures Fund, and it would be really useful, I think, in the either in the progress, is probably the plan, isn't it, to highlight the things where we're hoping to spend capital to actually make a difference. So I think, you know, seeing that list, or seeing, you know, the list of things that we think are coming up would be really helpful. Thank you.
That's great. I think we get that done. All I just wanted to finish on, Mr. Chairman, is to thank those that have been involved in it, both members, but particularly the officers. I do feel that Matt, Neil, and with Kate's support as well, have done an absolutely outstanding job to get us here. I am sorry that I will not be the one who eventually is proposing the final climate strategy, but I think that we have the structure here to come out with something which actually is, if not world beating, then is an exemplar for the country, when we look at the structure that we will have, not only on the strategy, but the way that it feeds into our absolute actions, and the way that it allows us to record them and to work out whether that success has been there. So I hope that my successor, when takes it over, will have as much enthusiasm for it as I have. And again, I would really like to thank Neil, Kate, and particularly Matt, because the vision has been there to bring us to this point, and I very much think that it will be there over the next few months to get us to the final point of it as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Green. Also, your passion and detail on the subject has been, been really refreshing. So thanks for that. And I think it's a testament to everybody, across party in this committee and across the council for the work that we're all doing to obviously reduce our carbon emissions, which is of vital importance to us and our residents. And also a special thanks to Mr. Chapman over there, who does, he's always contacting us and is very passionate. And obviously it's people like Mr. Chapman that, ultimately, affect change. So thanks to everybody and for the officers as well, and for Manuel for all the work that you do. So thanks very much. I mean, it's an excellent report and it's going to do a lot of good. So thanks very much, and sorry for keeping you so long, but important issue. So thank you. So what I suggest we go on. I mean, time's a little bit against us. So what I'm suggesting, we just, instead of taking a comfort break now, we move back to our agenda item 6, which is the Paul crematorium reports. I think hopefully we've got Councillor Broadhead in here. Oh, sorry, Councillor Broadhead. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we just take a 5-minute break and we're back. Sorry, Councillor Broadhead. Is that okay? So.
Oh, no.
Sorry, folks, we're going live shortly. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Okay, that's Councillor Broadhead. Sorry to keep you waiting. So you've been making really patiently. So, you know, and congratulations on your new position as well. So, welcome. Oh, you may be muted.
Over to me. Yeah, brilliant. All right, thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you to everyone for joining tonight. As colleagues may well have noticed, I'm not the cabinet member for this, and as colleagues will also note, the cabinet member Mark Anderson is off sick and has been for a little while. So I hope we all share the sentiments of wishing him a speedy recovery and you know, particularly during this very difficult time for him. So it falls to me today to introduce a report, and because it's not my cabinet, I will do so without a great amount of detail, but the detail is very much contained within the report. So the brief summary, as colleagues will know, around 6 months ago in September 2022, as an administration, we made the formal commitment and listening to public opinion, also because it's a long held view for many of us, to certify that we would be looking to bring the cremators back at the former Poole crematorium. And at that point, at that cabinet meeting, we asked officers to bring forward a report within the next 6 months, which we have here in front of us, with the aim of looking at what the options were for bringing those cremators forward. We'd said in that cabinet meeting as well that our aim was very much to try and ensure that is done at pace, so a recommendation that was done within 18 months, but also recognising that there were options that we may wish to work through, which again are detailed in the options that are in front of us on this report. I'd like to thank officers and for all those involved for a significant amount of work that's happened within that time frame. I'd also like to pay tribute to the many people that have written to us and the many stakeholders that have showed real passion about bringing these cremators back. Only in the last couple of days I've had further emails from people like John Ainsworth from the Churches Together in Poole, who, quite aside from just sending emails saying we'd like you to do something, have put a lot of additional effort and work and research themselves into helping us shape proposals that may come forward, and I'd like to pay tribute to all of them for their continued investment into this programme. So, Mr. Chairman, we tend to have two different types of cabinet paper that we consider a cabinet. One which is about strategy and direction, which is very much led by the administration. Those where we ask officers and professionals to go away and prepare options for us to consider. This is one of the latter papers. Because of that, invariably there might not be things that even I, as leader, or the cabinet members don't agree with in the report in terms of the analysis. But I suppose that's the nature of where we are, and that's why we've got a number of options in front of us as well. Some things that I might not agree with. I do think that whilst one can easily look at the fact that private cremators have opened up, so that has taken the capacity and the options away from where we have in the local area. I think that can be pessimistic sometimes, and actually people do turn to the more municipally led or authority providers for this type of thing, and actually re-entering the market, I think, presents significant opportunities as well. So in summary, we've got 4 options in front of us which this report goes into, although I really think it's really just 3 options, because option number 1 is don't do anything. Don't replace the cremators in Poole, which I think certainly our cabinet commitment and this administration is that we would not be favouring that option, but it is there as option 1, which means that we've got options 2, 3 and 4, and as colleagues I'm sure will have read the report, option 2 is to get going very quickly, do the more traditional route, put the gas cremators in at pace. That has pros and cons. The pros are clearly that we can do that. We know exactly how they operate, we know what their capacity is, we know how to install them, we know how to operate them. But of course the weaknesses are, as we've discussed in just the last meeting of your scrutiny board, Chair, the not the most climate friendly options that are available for us. The gas and the nitrogen oxide emissions are much higher, and indeed there are more future proof options available to us. So that's option number 2. Option number 3 is to go at pace and restate the cremators quickly with 2 electric cremators, and again pros and cons to both of those. They are not brand new technology now, so there are more coming through the market. There could potentially be a slight longer lead in than we might like, but again, all the more reason one could argue to get going and order those more quickly. At the moment, we have a slightly longer cremation time, as I understand, for electric cremators than gas cremators, but clearly there is significant both financial benefits in terms of running them, as well as climate friendly benefits of that as well. And then there is a fourth option as well, which is to continue the commitment to reinstate the cremators at Poole Crematorium, but in light of potential emerging new technology, just to keep an eye on that and then look for a slightly longer time frame. So Chairman, that's the options in front of us, and I'd really welcome discussion, input and views from the Scrutiny Board as to your preferred options. I've got an idea of what I'm inclined towards. There may even be other options, dare I say, outside of those four that we may wish to explore tonight as well, and be really open that, considering we do have four options in front of us, to have a genuine discussion about what people feel we should be going moving forward. Chairman, there may even be colleagues in the room who don't think we should be replacing the cremators at Poole. I fully respect that may well be their view. It is a strong commitment from this administration that we are going to do so. So we will be at the cabinet meeting deciding a way forward on this and entering that into the capital programme and committing to that either at pace or whatever the option decides. But really welcome a discussion. You probably gathered this isn't my area of expertise, so I'm really ably joined today by a number of the officers. So joining us today to answer the more detailed questions that members may have are Andy MacDonald, who is our Head of Parks and Bereavement Services. I think we've also got Liz Hall on the line, who's our bereavement coroners and mortuary manager, as well as the Director of Environment, Kate Langdown. So hope that gives a brief overview on the journey that we've been on, where we're hoping to go to, and I'm really looking forward next Wednesday to make the final decision and make that firm commitment to get the replacement cremators at Poole by whichever means we arrive at. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Broadhead, and that's a great summary of where we are. And also thanks to the officer team for getting this report and work done so quickly. After I wish to get it done. So thanks for everyone involved. I suggest we bring Andy, Liz, and Kate in, as required, as we go through the questions, and also just to make sure everyone's seen the latest cabinet report that was sent earlier on. So we're referring to that report. So I think I'll go to Councillor Brooke first, then Councillor Butt online, then we go to Councillor Hadley. So Councillor Brooke.
Fine, thank you, Chair. I'd like to actually start, having read the document, the report, and the other report, the detailed study, very carefully. I would like to put forward immediately, and then obviously be discussion on it, that we recommend to Cabinet that they adopt option 4. So that's it. That's a proposal I'd like to make at the start, and obviously ask for a seconder.
Happy to second that.
I clearly needn't vote on it at this point in time, but it gets us started and a focus. And I do have some questions that relate very much to that proposal and some of the issues. So if I can start, clearly my first question relates to the business case, because the financial business case as presented in the reports doesn't really stack up unless you talk about movement across from Bournemouth and very significant marketing to try and capture the other markets locally. But what opening up the crematorium would do is, especially if option 4 with the latest electrical cremators would do, is to actually be one of the first in the country, and it would give us green credentials that we could use in advertising, which is going to attract quite a lot of people as we move forward on the climate change and ecological emergency as well. So the first question really relates to the business case, and that is it perfectly acceptable for us to rely on other elements other than the financial to enable us to push forward. And I'm thinking here of the fact that it's the well-being of our residents is very important, and certainly with the petition that's come in, there's a very strong public feeling that we should have the Poole crematorium back in full use. Operating costs actually are better for option 4 in the long run. Carbon footprint reduction is better, but it's just that financial thing. Business cases always tend to hinge on finance. So Phil, I'm just asking here, if you like, a little bit of clarification that it is a really strong argument against using the financial, but using the humane elements and the environmental elements that option 4 would bring, that could actually produce a sound case. If you could answer that one first.
I'm not sure if that's one for Phil or Andy.
Yeah.
Perhaps Andy might bring that.
So there is, I mean, there was two arguments, as you said. There's a financial and there is a well-being, but also I think you need to realise that by taking some of the pressure off of Bournemouth, which is also one of the busiest crematorium in the country, it allows us to also change how we present the service at Bournemouth, and particularly we can extend some of our service time, which is also a big criticism that we get. So there are pros and cons, but we feel as a team that having the two, it will benefit the bereavement care as a whole across BCP Council. I don't know if Liz wants to add a little bit more.
Fine, no, that's fine, and that clarifies quite nicely and matches my own views and feelings on this. And you also made a point about aiding the pressure on Bournemouth by providing 2 electrical cremators in Poole. It allows us to improve our resilience, which I think is probably what you're talking about. And again, that makes it a very, very strong case. Now, you could argue that that happens with option 3 as well, but option 3 doesn't have, while it's a little bit cheaper to install, it has higher running costs than option 4 and is also not as efficient in terms of running costs. It's more expensive in the long run. And actually option 4 eventually outprices or outruns the gas cremators as well by about year 18. I know that's getting near to the end of life, but at least it does show that in the long run, option 4 is going to be the cheapest option in terms of running costs and maintenance as well. There's reference to the VAT there, and again, if we are going for electrical, as I would like us to do, it raises the issue of VAT and installation in 1 year or 2 years. I think there was a very strong point being made there with regard to the VAT and the impact that has if we introduce the cremators within 1 year. And I'm just trying to relate option 3 and 4 here, that are both options running across 2 years, or is it only option 4 that would run across two years? And is the time difference between the two particularly significant in terms of the end dates? Because they both seem to be ending installation within a few months of each other. Again, that's probably one for Andy.
Yeah, so the thing is that most of the cremated stuff will be paid anyway, so it would happen over more than one financial year because of ordering, construction work, installation, then training facilities afterwards. So it would certainly be spread across a much longer period of time. So okay, it's a very difficult one to answer until we actually know where option 4 comes online, shall we say, with the new technology that is on the horizon. So, yeah. But certainly 3 was definitely over 2 financial years. So,
right, thank you. And the final question, which sort of follows on from that, really, if we went for option 4, which again I've said is my preferred option in terms of recommendation to Cabinet, if we get part way along the line with that and then find there is a longer delay than we expected, how easy would it be to switch to option 3? Could we switch to option 3?
Option 3 is already known technology that exists within Europe, so it should be quite easy to switch back to that if that was the case.
So there is there is actually a fallback position.
Yes, and it's being used in other crematorium in the UK as well.
Yeah. Okay, I have to say I still rather like the idea of being the first to have the green credentials on this, or the greener credentials on this one, and I also like the fact that we have got a fallback with option 3. So, Chair, I don't think I need to say any more in terms of, if you like, proposing that option and throw it open.
Okay, it's how everyone wants to handle this, and obviously the options are quite clear in the report before us. What I would suggest if we just keep the discussion going with all the options, then come back for a vote on the options, perhaps individually at the end. Are you happy with that? Yeah. Okay. I think Councillor Butt online would like to come. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful to you. With regard to all the options, I will speak and then support the option I feel is best forward. It's good to see Councillor Broadhead here supporting Councillor Anderson. I send my very best wishes to him and hope he has a swift recovery. Yes, this has been a long journey. It started in the summer of last year when Churches Together approached myself and Councillor Iyengar with regard to concerns about the fact that the report to Scrutiny and to Cabinet was to be that these would be put in abeyance until 25-26. So this is really a very good example of community engagement, where all those parties and bodies which you talk about, Councillor Broadhead, came forward and said, well, up with this, we don't want to put, and actually, can we talk about it? So over time, it has been talked about. It's gone to Cabinet, where representation was made by myself. It's gone to Scrutiny, where representation was made by Councillor Iyengar. And we've ended up today with a much better looking way forward. So that journey has definitely been one of engagement and one of people coming together across all parties and the public. I'm very pleased to support option 4. I think it is the best option. I would agree with Councillor Brooke that there are some issues that still need pounding out perhaps. But one thing I would like to ask, please, is an area of concern which actually does come directly from John Ainsworth and Churches Together, who we've been working with over the last 9 months. And he raises, he asks the question, what happens if the British electric cremator is not yet available, nor is it likely to be available when the matter is due to be considered in the summer of 2024 under option 4? Because in that scenario, they would expect the council to commit to installing the current electric cremators available at that stage if electric cremation is considered the best way to deal with the disposal of the deceased. And obviously there's that matter as to whether we can source that in the UK or if we need to look further afield. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful to you.
Okay, thanks for that. I think there was more of a statement than a question, unless I missed anything there, Councillor Butt.
There was a question in there. The question was at the end from Paul Churches Together, who clearly asked the question about the area of concern about the cremators not yet being available, what would happen in 2024, and whether we were able to source those cremators in UK or further afield. Thank you.
I think I answered. Sorry,
Andy may not have picked it up online, Councillor, but sorry, Andy, do you want to come back in there?
I think I answered that in the previous question, is that there is the option to go back to option 3. Though those cremators are produced in, I can't remember if it was Holland or Germany, so it's not there is no UK-based electric cremator producer, and that is already a proven technology that exists as we speak. So.
Thank you. I will I will return that reply to Churches Together. I'm grateful to be able to ask that question on their behalf. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Butt. Councillor Hadley, I'll move you next.
Thank you. Well, Councillor Butt wasn't the only one that people came to with this, and I think it is across many of us got representations from people, and I was really grateful to the team for the chance to go and visit both crematoriums in order to understand the service. And that bit of the interdependence and the value to Bournemouth actually in having a working cremator at Poole is significant, not least because all 4 of the cremators at Bournemouth are in the same hall. So you have a fire, you've got a problem, and during COVID, I know the team split to 2 and worked very, very independently, but in the same facility because you had to, and did the best with what you had. I'm actually a bit disappointed at jumping to option 4 because that is the well. I'd like to understand a little bit more about that because innovative is maybe the wrong word. It's from what I can see, it's a UK supplier selling something that doesn't yet exist, and that's always dangerous. Is it leading edge or is it bleeding edge? There are two manufacturers in Europe. I know we've left Europe, but I guess the question is, how do we get good value in terms of a competitive procurement if we say we're going to go to one supplier and it's innovative and it's UK based, unless we're getting a cracking deal because we are Versatype and we it's a partnership. So I'd like a little bit more information on that specifically. Why jump to a UK producer and how close is it to real use? Because when I did the study back in September, I found 7 crematoria in England that were live or very near live with electric cremators using one or the other of the 2 European models. Can I ask that one and come back?
Yeah, UK. Andy, pick that up. I know Liz, you wanted to come in as well. So.
Andy, do you want to go in first?
So the consultants that we instructed have told us that there was a new technology due onto the British market in July 2024. The advantages of that equipment is that they can be retrofitted into a much older crematorium. The current electric cremators come as a very large modular unit, which means significant structural engineering would have to happen to Poole Crematorium as well in order to fit them in. So one of the advantages were that they could be fitted at a much cheaper cost as well. I've forgotten what the other question was. Sorry, yeah, there are 7 crematorium, but there's only, my understanding was there's 2 actually only active, and most of them are brand new ones as well, which is where we're struggling a little bit with retrofitting in the future. Liz, have I missed something? I've missed a bit of the question, I think. Sorry.
As far as I'm aware, DFW Europe is the only supplier that's currently installed within crematoria that are operating as electric crematoriums. I'm not aware of any other supplier. Now, this emerging new technology that is coming out in July 2024 is currently going through some rigid testing, regulated testing, as far as I'm aware. And there are other interested cremation authorities that are keen to purchase once that becomes available on the general market. We've been offered, obviously, insight under a non-disclosure agreement into what that technology involves. Now, this new emerging technology will involve the actual equipment being built on site and is a much smaller but more quicker in terms of cremation times once it's fully bedded in. The DFW Europe supplier, that is the only supplier of electric cremations in England and Wales at the moment, everything is built off-site and is built in Europe. So that means obviously shipping charges and tax implications with it being shipped over, and also, as Andy's already highlighted, would involve significant structural changes to the roofing system of Poole Crematorium in order to crane the cremators in through the roof space.
Thanks for that, Liz. Andy, would you like to come back at all?
Yeah, okay. Well, Lambeth Council was a retrofit, and when I went up to Poole, it may have changed, and I guess that's understanding that would be helpful. He felt that the doorway would need to be raised in order to get the units in, but it didn't sound to me like that was a major change to the structure of the building. It was effectively enlarging the door at the back in order to get a bigger unit in. And the other question then, I suppose, with the modular unit is one of the reasons that it comes as one unit is because it's very highly insulated, because it's permanently on. And so if you have a modular unit, presumably you have an issue or a concern about how thermally efficient it will be, whether it would be less insulated or less, there'll be gaps effectively if it's not where it's put together. So that's the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, all the cremators are highly insulated, Councillor, because of the temperatures that they operate at 600 to 800 degrees C. There's also a mezzanine floor which holds up other equipment in Poole Crem, which would also need some alteration as well. That comes into some, there's some other issues around that as well, but I won't go into that at the moment. But it's just, and also the modular ones are a lot heavier, so there is a potential that we also have to do some structural work to the floor as well, and so it can hold the loading as well. So there's quite a few significant structural issues we have to deal with if we go with the current technology. The insulating bit is something that will come as standard, and it comes with all cremators, whether they're electric or gas, because of the temperatures they operate at. So.
Thank you. So then I was interested in the capacity calculations, and I read them in the main report and did some maths, and then read more detail in the more detailed report. But it suggested that the most likely number of cremations that could be conducted at Poole was 1463 cremations, yeah, which is slightly less than Salisbury do, and slightly more than Harbourview do, and quite a lot less obviously than Bournemouth do, which is 4,446 across four units. And I guess Salisbury has a population of 41,800, and again, in terms of that extra delay, one of the reasons that so many cremations have gone to Harbourview is because we haven't had a working cremator in Poole, and the longer we leave it for, the longer or the more entrenched that position will be. But it is also a commercial situation for one funeral director that other directors, I was going to say patients then, clients will not be able to use. So there is a real gap, and that extends if we extend the timeline. But I was also felt that calculation didn't seem to cover seasonal fluctuations, breakdowns, staff shortages, the operational things. So I wasn't sure whether it actually covered all of the detail around the operating bit, not least because there was a figure of, I think, 22% winter variation increase in the winter months. So how confident are we in that figure? Yeah, and it does seem to be low.
Yeah, the answer to your question, the figure work did actually include everything you just suggested, including breakdown, servicing, everything. I have to say 14,000 cremations is quite standard for a 2-unit cremator setup. You've mentioned Harbourview, that's their figure. New Milton are doing something very similar with a 2-unit one as well. So it's sort of within industry guidelines. So it was no surprise to myself and Liz that was the figure that they came towards. Yeah, that we just remember that is standard operating times at sort of 8 o'clock till 8 in the morning till 5 at night. So we have options to operate outside of those times if you need to expand or contract. So which is something we looked at heavily during the COVID period for obvious reasons. So I think we're fairly confident, Liz, aren't we?
Yes, yeah, I'd also add that the 1,463 cremations a year is an indicative figure based on the drive time analysis information that's been provided in the feasibility study. That figure could be improved upon, bearing in mind what we were cremating at Poole when it was an actively cremating site, carrying out less than 3,000 at the time. But obviously with nearby competition coming on board in 2017, us stopping cremations at Poole in 2020, is obviously changed the dynamic of the local market significantly. But that doesn't mean to say that it can't change again.
Thanks, Ken. So yeah, one more, then we'll move on.
Yeah, one more from me if I can. In the financial bits, there were two areas that were interesting. One was added costs. The teams worked across the two sites before, and I know that some of that is the staff transferring, and I think one of the staff was allocated within the finances to be transferred back. But presumably, if the numbers at Bournemouth are going down, then some of the staff are actually operating that unit could transfer back potentially. And then the other one was the maintenance. So the SWOT says that gas maintenance is more expensive, but the figure in the financial table is the same.
Yeah, it's okay. You have to have certain trained numbers of staff on site whenever you're operating a crematorium. So yes, we have got staff. We already interchange staff already between the two sites, and it's something we've actively doing. It's something we've been trying to do to encourage a one team approach. We will just need to up some of those numbers because of the minimum number of staff you need on site when you're operating cremators. I think we're hedging our bets with the maintenance cost because some of it is fairly unknown until we actually know what the long-term thing, especially with the electric ones. We can only go on sort of the gas ones that we know from, and what CDS have actually given us an indication of what those future costs could be for electric ones, and they are the main suppliers of the electric ones in the country at the moment. So we're basing it on their figures. So.
Okay, thanks, Andy, times two. Sorry, Councillor Earl, did you? I'm not sure if I had you on the list. Okay, does anyone else want to speak to this? I think just a couple of questions from myself regarding the direct cremations. I know that's sorry, I feel uncomfortable using the words. That's sort of a growth market. So obviously that's mentioned in the report. Do you think that's there's actually is a greater demand for that than we could potentially be looking at? I know the team, when I visited the team there, it was amazingly helpful that they felt there was actually quite a big potential for us to grow the market there, the BCP area and the surrounding areas.
Liz, do you want to respond to that, because you've actually got a bit of industry insight after last weekend? So
So yes, Councillor Gabriel, there is an increasing demand for direct cremation, and I think that's purely driven by the costs. Direct cremation or unattended cremations are significantly less to the families as a full funeral service. In terms of whether that's how that will impact, if we actually go and install new cremators at Poole, again, that provides us with the opportunity to expand our current business model, which could and will include expanding on the direct cremation model. It is a growing industry in terms of the type of service and the value of the service, but there's also other growing concerns associated with direct cremation and how people are grieving as a result of not having that full funeral service experience and closure. There's separate elements that we can look at in terms of having the direct cremation followed by a memorial service. It's conversations and discussions that myself and Councillor Anderson have had with representatives of the Churches Together association, and one that we will continue to have with them and hopefully develop into a workable package in the very near future. As Andy mentioned, I was at an educational in the Midlands last weekend, so it was an excellent opportunity to network with other colleagues that are in the bereavement industry. And what was quite a common theme from many crematorium operators on the south coast is direct cremation is definitely growing and expanding exponentially. However, on the northern part of the country, it isn't. And so there's a great discussions about why that was, and it was all to do with demographics, faiths, and that sort of thing. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thanks very much, Bo. I think the only question I have, forgive me if it's in the report and I've missed it, the length of life for the Bournemouth cremators, where are we with that? Last I heard, they at least 10 years left in them, but I could be incorrectly quoting there. Sorry.
Liz, do you want to me? I don't mind.
So the cremators at Bournemouth, so we've got 4 cremators. We've got the 3 standard, and then we've got the 1 bariatric with the FT3 that's in, which is the most recent one. Obviously, throughout the years, they've had relevant upgrades that have been needed to the software. We've obviously carried out significant maintenance works, which includes the reinforcement of the refractories and so forth. Currently, our engineers from the supply or the manufacturer of the cremating equipment have advised that we've got up to 10 years life expectancy with the existing equipment at Bournemouth. Now, the only other concern that we need to factor into this discussion is obviously bariatric. We've got 3 standard size and we've got 1 bariatric at Bournemouth Crematorium. If we're going down the option of installing new cremators at Poole, both cremators are the option that we go for, will be both bariatric size. People are getting larger, coffins are getting bigger, and there will be restrictions in terms of what size of coffin we can cremate in a standard size cremator, so that needs to be factored in as well.
Okay, thanks, Liz. That's a really good response there. Thanks very much. Andy, did I respond just for final time?
If I could just one little thing, resumation was mentioned in the report, but nothing about that, and obviously that's going beyond electric. So if we're being innovative, there is a resumation unit, I believe, in South Tees that's live. but it's Scottish technology that's mostly used in the United States currently. So where was that in the discussions? Did it get dismissed completely, or actually, how does that fit? Being innovative,
I think we did when we discussed it, but I'll hand it back to the officers. Sorry, Liz or Andy, I don't want to pick this up.
Liz, you know
Andy?
more about it than I do.
You're absolutely right, Councillor Hadley. It is a very popular choice of cremation in the United States. However, the regulations in UK are very, very different to the regulations that govern the operation of exhumation. So it's a water cremation in effect. You are right, there is a testing site up in the north of the country, but I also believe that a lot of the water authorities still have very big concerns regarding the technology involving the water, and obviously the public water supplies, that any residual fluids from the water cremation process will end up going into. So it is very much in its infancy. I think it's something that may potentially take off in future, but not immediately. And I think just like cremation when it was first introduced in this country at the in mid 19th century, people were horrified by the thought of going from burial to a cremation, certainly a fire cremation. But obviously now it is widely accepted, and it is the preferred method of disposal for many of the people in this country. So maybe further on down the line, water cremation could be the same, but not at the moment. I don't think there's much of an appetite at the moment because of the constraints in place in this country.
Yeah, thanks for that, Liz. Okay, no problem, thank you. So Councillor Butler, is that right? Sorry, Councillor Butler, I missed you online there. So please come in.
That's all right, thank you, Chairman. Yes, a lot of residents, as shown by the petition that was put forward, really want to have the cremators reinstalled to Poole Crematorium as soon as possible, really. The worry about the option 4 is that it's new technology, and it actually states in the report new and emerging green technology. Is there a guarantee as to the supply of the equipment, the efficiency of it, and the ultimate costs? Because if we're going to wait till 2024 and then we don't even know which month it might be, the costs might go up quite a bit, and the timescale might extend as well. And I'm just a bit bothered that the people that might be using the whole service in Poole might start looking somewhere else, and then we'll never get back the numbers that we should. And I think whichever option is decided, we've got to consider the needs of the residents, the funeral directors, and other related businesses, because they all rely on the cremation service as a whole. So it's not just one part, it's the whole group. And obviously the electric option is probably the preferred because of the targets that we've got to keep. But it's a bit disappointing that the electric cremators at the moment are so large and needing to have the building possibly changed. So I don't know if there are any other options in things that are already developed in the electric facility. And also another question is, would it be possible at all to repair at least one cremator while we're waiting? Is that a possibility? No. Right.
Yeah, I think
it's a bit like trying to repair a classic car. You can't get all the parts. It's it's obsolete. It's literally become obsolete because new cremators have come online. It's like current car manufacturers, they stopped supplying the parts for the old one. So
right.
In terms of electric, there is only one supplier as Liz has already alluded to. The new supplier, which I can't go into detail in, they are well advanced on their testing. And the company who the consultancy that we've spoken to are confident that there will be supply coming to the British market in July 2024. I can't guarantee anything. Nothing's guaranteed, as you can probably appreciate. But as we've discussed, there are fallback options in various stages when we know if things aren't happening. I think that will be up to us to make sure we're monitoring the situation on a regular basis and keeping in touch with the people who've already offered. We can liaise with the company involved, which we would want to do at the earliest opportunity.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Butler. Thank you. Does anyone else indicate?
Yes, I'll speak.
Councillor Lawton.
I've listened to the arguments quite closely, and I understand where Councillor Brooks is coming from, but I'm leaning towards option 3. The reason I'm leaning towards option 3 is we can do it fairly quickly. One of the dangers which we found when we were with the old Bournemouth Council, with new crematoria opening up outside of the area, we're losing, I know it's a horrible thing to say, but we're losing a considerable amount of business. And that business will continue to be lost. And for the reasons that we can more or less do it straight away within reason, I'm inclined to move that we adopt option 3, partly for business reasons, partly because it will help the people of Poole who wish to be cremated in Poole and not move to Bournemouth. There's too long a time lag between us adopting and installing option 4. It's commendable, and long term I think we should do option 4, but in the immediate term, to maintain the business, to satisfy the people of Poole who wish to be cremated in Poole for their relatives, etc., and are taking their business elsewhere because they cannot be cremated in Poole, I recommend that we adopt option 3.
Okay. Councillor Hedges.
Thank you, Chair. As I say, I'm a substitute for this meeting, but we've gone through all the papers in detail, and again, congratulate the officers for so much detail and business investigation, what's possible, what isn't, balancing off what would work, what wouldn't. To some degree, if I was looking at this, as a business person, I would say, one, do we really need them? Is it worth the expense? We've got a crematorium in Poole. It's highly prized. It's highly thought of. You can't cremate your loved ones there. So after the service, you have to go to another town on a journey, which I would feel is unnecessary. It must be heartbreaking. So from my point of view, I feel for everybody and the churches together, and everybody's expressed concern. And there are other many faith issues where should one or all 4 cremators in Poole be out of action, or any other, maybe all the roads are blocked, as apparently they are this evening, to have a crematorium with no cremator or cremators in it, it's hard to be hard to explain that to residents. Whilst unfortunately, I'm never a great fan of cutting edge technology and innovative this and projected that. We can't take a gamble that maybe in 2024 maybe we might not be available. So all those considering listening to the debate, I think I would tend to lean towards option 3 as well, but I feel we need cremators in the Poole crematorium.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Hedges. I've got a plan how to take this forward, with votes. So I'll get to that after Councillor Earl's spoken. So, Councillor Rigby wants to come as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really glad actually to hear the committee is feeling a bit more optimistic about cremators, because it was only a few months ago that we were in a position where this was going to be a wait of years for the residents of Poole to actually have any sort of cremator in the crematorium. I still think there is very much scope to go down option 4. Looking at future proofing, looking at new technology, there is an element of risk, but I think because of the fact we're looking at a matter of months, possibly 6 months maximum, between the installation and to get it working, it's a very small amount of time to give over to something that's effectively cheaper to run in the long term, is future proofed, and is also more environmentally friendly as well. So, you know, I think because of our climate and ecological emergency credentials, I think because of the cost, option 4 is still the most preferred one in my view, and I think we should definitely go for that rather than option 3. And so I still support my colleague's proposal for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor, for those words. Councillor Ripley.
Yeah, I was going to say a very similar thing actually, so I'm glad you got in before me. Just about the lead time for the for option 3 takes us anyway into 2024 before the installation, and it does only give a few months. But I think maybe the sensible way forward might be to potentially adjust the recommendation slightly with what Councillor Brick was saying before about having the fallback as being option 3. If, say, we get to a point where, oh, actually something's happened in the testing and this isn't going to come forward for another 12 months from this point, then we fall back to option 3 after a certain duration, or if we get to a certain point where it seems unfeasible that we'd have cremators operating in 2024.
Okay, Councillor Jess, do you want to come in?
I just wanted to come in on clarification point, because I think the report probably isn't very clear on the timescales, and I guess I'm saying this, and there is obviously potential for movement depending on when the new technology comes through, but the information we've given is summer 2024, so June 2024, and that'll be very quick to install. So actually, I think between options 3 and 4, the timelines are very similar in terms of the long term because of the complexity of the work in terms of installing option 3. So apologies if that wasn't really clear in the report. I don't know if Andy or Liz want to come in terms of clarification on any of that.
Yeah, I think you've summed it up really well, Jess, to be honest with you. It's the 4th option will be a quicker install because we have to do less works to the actual building itself. There is also an incredibly long lead. We're being told 9 to 12 months on the current electrical cremators that we can get. We believe there's going to be a crossover when we'll know which one certainly will be there to go down that route. So yeah, we think it will be, you know, the summer of rather than the winter of. That's much the difference.
Okay, thanks, Andy. I've got Councillor Butt online would like to come in. Councillor, did you indicate again? Sorry, Councillor Hadley after that, and I think we'll close it off after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, clarifying my point, and also to Councillor Millie Earle for the point she made. I still very much feel, having listened very carefully to the debate, that option 4 is the option that we should be adopting. It's the one which, on consultation with engagement, people have clearly stated is the one that we would wish put forward. But I do note that there's no environmental impact report attached to the report to Cabinet, and as a result, there's no information to the Council on the impact of the environment of not putting in cremators into full cremation and the delay of doing so. So just wondered whether that would be put in, added, but it's missing at the minute. And also I find it a bit odd that the statement about, it's a bit misleading to say that the 10 operating crematoria in the area. I mean, who's going to go to Southampton or Salisbury or Yeovil or Weymouth or New Milton? That's unlikely. So based on that, I can't vote because unfortunately I've had to jump in as a substitute and remotely. I'm not in a position to have been there in person, but just that my wish would be that if I were able to vote, I would be supporting option 4. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor Butt. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Just a bit of clarification. So I've just been looking online, and because I was sure there were two manufacturers, and there's one called Facilitative Technologies, which is based in Holland and has an office in Leeds. So there are 2 manufacturers in Europe, as far as I'm aware. No. Okay.
One is gas.
You're the experts, not me. Okay, that's fine. And then
please. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to shorten the name of the supply to FAC Tech because it's a bit of a mouthful to say it in full. They are the leading supplier on gas cremators in the United Kingdom, and they supply gas. I think their equipment is installed in about 80% of the crematoria in the United Kingdom, including our nearby competitors.
Okay.
And what we've got at Bournemouth and what we historically had at Poole as well was FAC Tech equipment. gas.
And then through your chair, sorry, can I just confirm that you wouldn't have to take out the mezzanine floor if you go for the I was going to say the Meccano version, for the option 4 version?
I think we'd have to test, wouldn't we, Andy? It's not been
Yeah,
made clear yet, but
the advice we've been getting from the consultancy firm is that because they're coming in a more modular unit, they'll be a lot smaller as well, because the size they're being, it's like new electric, anything electric, it's being improved as we move along, isn't it? That they have not suggested that we would need to do any additional works to pull as a result.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see anyone else indicating, so I think we're finished off there. Can I just thank the officers and Jess and for Councillor Broadhead for staying on. If I can just say a few words, I think for me, you know, I've listened carefully to all the comments about option 4, but I don't think that delay is going to be acceptable to the people of Poole, and I think there's a risk for delay. For me, I think option 3 is the way to go to get these units in, get them working for the people which they've been asking for. How I suggest we take this forward, obviously we've got to make a recommendation, hang on a second, to Cabinet. Sorry, Mike. Okay, so what I'm suggesting we do, obviously we've got a proposal from Mike, which we will take a vote on, but also I think we've got the option at 3. So I think I would like to propose that we go for option 3, and I can have a seconder for that. Okay, so Councillor Brooke, do you want to come in now, sum up now?
Thank you, Chair. There is obviously a risk with option 4, but it has financial advantages. It has build finance advantages, and it also has marketing advantages over option 3 in terms of the green credentials, which is something that I think the external funeral directors who don't have access to Harbour View would certainly appreciate and welcome, and would respond to, as would many residents. So I think that those advantages outweigh the risk, and as we've heard, we can fall back onto option 3 should the timings and additional unknown delays come in. So in many ways there is no need to have a separate proposal for option 3. You go for option 4 with the amendment, if you like, that Councillor Rigby mentioned, and I'd also mentioned, that you actually make the recommendation of option 4, but with option 3 as the fallback position, should that be necessary.
Yeah, okay. I mean, obviously talk to both our recommendations. Again, I'll stick to my my initial thoughts. I think the risk is too much there, so I'd like to go for option 3. So what was your recommendation was first we vote on option 4 first, then we move to a vote on option 3. Is everyone agreeable with that? I think that's the best way forward. It's the correct way forward. Okay, so we're talking. Councillor Broadhead.
Chairman, I'll come in at the end. Carry on. Thank you.
Okay, so just we're going to vote on option 4, which is invest in the latest electric cremator technology to be released in the UK market in the summer of 2024. So that'd be our recommendation for Cabinet. So can I take members voting for? Against? 3, 4, 5 against. Abstentions? Okay, thanks, Andy. We'll move to option 3, which is to invest into electric cremators. Okay, can we indicate for members for? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favour. Any against? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, so that would be our recommendation to Cabinet. Councillor Broadhead, did you want to come through?
Yeah, just to say, actually, thank you very much to all members for a really healthy and positive discussion. I think there's a lot of utility in having a number of options within there. I think we're all now aligned, and I'm really pleased to have led the charge that we are going to be definitively making a decision about the future of the cremators. You'll have noticed my extensive knowledge from my contributions during that, but no, in all seriousness, thank you, like you said, to all of the officers that have been working hard. I'll take away those reflections and the recommendation, as well as all of the other points, back to Cabinet colleagues as we reflect on this going forward into Cabinet on Wednesday. One final point from me is that I think I'd been a little harsh in my introduction about the report that was in front of you, because I'd actually been looking at the old version of the report myself, of which I'd made a number of recommendations, and then Jess Gibbons during the course of the debate helpfully pointed out that even I was looking at the own version of where the recommendations have been actually incorporated in. So so thank you to Jess for embarrassing me like that and making it very clear. But you know, I did say at the beginning there were elements which I think could be improved, and I think a lot of that is within there, particularly the certainty that we will need about this decision, because you know, I share some of the concerns about enabling that whichever way we move forward on this, we are absolutely committed to doing this and do so in a formal environment. So thank you very much for the debate.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Broadhead. And can I just thank the officers for staying on so long, Liz and Andy and Jess. We really appreciate it, and thanks for the information you put into the report.
Mr. Chairman, could I just, as a point of process, as somebody who's listening, I'm probably the only one who's remotely listening, but no declaration was made as to whether the vote was won or lost as to what the numbers were. Clearly, the option 3 was the proposed and the preferred option, but nothing was said after the first option of vote for. Option 4 was put forward. It was just 4 against, and you went to option 3. So for those who are listening and for public record, could we know what those results were, please? Thank you.
Yeah, of course, Councillor, but I think we had a microphone error there, so I've asked Claire to read those out.
Sure, Chairman. So the vote on option 4 was 3 in favour, 5 against and 1 abstention. And the vote on option 3 was 5 in favour, 1 against and 3 abstentions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for pointing that out. It's appreciated. Okay, so we can move on to agenda item number 8, which is levelling up and the regeneration bill reforms to the national planning policy and implications for the emerging Bournemouth, Christchurch and Port local plan. So I believe, sorry, Councillor Broadhead, I think you're up again.
Thank you very much. I might have a little bit more to say on this one, because it is a little bit more of an area of my well, maybe not expertise, but certainly interest, and something that we've been really pushing for and leading on for some time. What this report that we're taking to Cabinet is about is reflecting some of the updates to the NPPF, as well as the previous new announcements of the what is now called the LURB, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, which will have significant, I think, very positive implications for our local plan process, and particularly our aspirations both to keep it going at pace, to keep our placemaking as a central part of that, but also to assure that whilst we clearly need to build the right number of homes, that number is a number that's reflected in local reality rather than something that is imposed on us from central government. And as part of those updates to the NPPF, as well as the LURB, government has issued a consultation. That consultation closes in 3 hours time, I think. So we don't normally bring the consultation responses that the officers prepare to Cabinet, but because these are pretty significant to the process, and because, you know, I broadly agree with pretty much all of the responses that the planning team prepared, I thought it was a really good update to bring both to Cabinet and to Scrutiny, so that we could discuss those changes and the effect that they are going to have on our local plan process. I'll give a very kind of brief overview of some of the highlights for the changes that have been proposed as part of those movements from government, and they fall into a number of categories. Some of the changes to the process itself, so how the calculation and the local need in particular is assessed, but also the increased priority on local involvement, placemaking and beauty within the planning framework, something which I think has been lacking for some time and quite often is the source of some of the local concern in areas. So, for instance, one of the updates and the policy objectives within the consultation and the new plans, which should be coming in spring, are around renewed emphasis on making buildings beautiful and refusing ugliness and giving increased powers to be able to do that. Colleagues would have heard me talk before about the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission, which was kind of brought forward its recommendations in 2021, something I'm very familiar with, because actually the head of our municipally owned urban regeneration arm, Future Places, Gail Mayhew, was a commissioner on the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission. So it's something that we are very close to and we're already building into our own plans. And the changes within the framework on this one is to go much further than before and require every local planning authority as part of that process to provide design codes for their areas. Now, we're already ahead of this. We're actually already being chosen by government to have 2 design codes for our area. So we've been working as a pilot on this. And the idea is to set clear minimum standards on development in an area about height, form, density, as well as kind of beauty, I suppose, to use the word. And I think not only is this very welcome in bringing new powers up front into the plans that we haven't had before, but I personally feel, and this is why we're really strongly in favour of a number of these recommendations, is it gets over that real divide that quite often the local population have. If you talk to most local people, they want, and this is not just in BCP, this is in every part of the country, people want to see new homes for young people. They want to provide the right accommodation for those that just don't have that option. And yet there's always this real dichotomy of them kind of fighting against the system for providing new homes. And quite often that feels like it's because of loss of control. So I think bringing the community and local people much earlier into the design choices and the certainty about what they could get in their area is, I feel, a really powerful tool for encouraging people to allow new development to come forward rather than automatically and quite rightly being worried about it. So that's one of the first aims. There's also proposals for a new infrastructure levy that will be coming in, so bring a much more strategic approach to infrastructure. There's some nuance in that, and we're still waiting on the detail, but it's not a replacement for things such as Section 106. That will continue. It won't be switched off. But again, you know, a little bit like we've tried to do in our own authority by having, it was referred to earlier on, we've got our own Future Infrastructure Board, where we bring all of the infrastructure decisions in a much more strategic place. I think that's part of the aim for the process here. There's also proposals to bring forward to remove what is currently the requirement for local authorities to have a 5-year land supply. I think this is a really welcome and positive move. We've seen consistently developers and others abuse the system in that way, and even when an area has an up-to-date local plan, almost try and jump ahead of that and ignore that by using the lack of ability to clearly demonstrate the 5-year housing land supply. Government has recognised this, proposed the abolition of that, and also I think the government recognised that will give a very strong incentive to local areas to agree a clear local plan, knowing that it then carries some level of certainty and it's not just going to be instantly usurped because people think that there's no 5-year land supply. So I think that's another really welcome change. The big one, however, and this is something we've talked about in a number of these meetings when discussing our own local plan process, is the calculation for housing numbers in the area. Colleagues will be bored of me saying the story about this, but now this is a critical development, because previously the starting point, and really, I mean, it's called a starting point, but the real thrust of all of the local plan making process has been behind working towards housing numbers using something called the standard method. And that standard method took into account a number of different factors, such as house prices, population, all that kind of jazz, and then came up with a number that you should work towards to your new local plan. It has flaws in it, and we've discussed these before, and is one of those flaws in particular has really affected the BCP region with our proposed local plan and the standard methodology numbers, which was arriving at a figure that we had to plan for around 2,800 homes per year. And as we've reflected on before, the maximum number that we've ever achieved in a good year was 1,300, maybe slightly above. So if you slavishly followed that standard methodology, you'd have to be looking towards a local plan which essentially doubled your housing numbers that you were developing, and in a constrained area where we've got the sea on one side of us, a green belt around us, 22 triple SIs, that would really just give away most of our levers of our own placemaking. So we'd had some work around this. We had a plan that we're working through with government to try and mitigate that, to deviate from the standard methodology because of some errors in it. But I think government have woken up and realised they needed to put much firmer emphasis on or an alternate method being absolutely acceptable for local areas. So now it is very much with it, the proposals that are coming through will completely allow a justifiable alternate method. They even mention in the documents the issue that we faced here, that university towns with an above average population of students were affected negatively by that standard methodology. And so having the ability to have local need as a primacy for coming up with a new local plan number, I think is a clear move in the right direction, and means that we can actually plan for the population that we need to plan for, rather than some arbitrary number that's coming down through some Frankenstein calculation. So the impact that will have, incidentally, on our local plan process is that, you know, I'd already made a commitment that as long as I was doing this job, that we would be going towards our own alternate method, our own locally calculated need. But there was, you know, a little bit of tug of war with government around that, and there was an element of risk involved. These plans coming through takes that element of risk away. There is now that primacy for the locally derived figure being your starting block. So it means that our plan to start to have a draft local plan by the end of this calendar year is absolutely now achievable in a way that it perhaps was, you know, aspirational before. That's coupled with the changes to the government's recognised constraints, particularly Greenbelt. So now there is no need to consider Greenbelt as part of your local plan, where previously it was something that had to be in there in order for you to look at as you know, alongside all of the other parts to try and make the numbers work. You now are fully able as a local choice, and again, that's a choice that we might want to make to deviate from it, not one that I would make. To rule out the green belt, which is very, very precious in this area, flood risk, a lot of it, and quite often sites of scientific interest, and really focus on that brownfield, urban sustainable development-led approach, which I think is really welcome. It's a really unwelcome distraction for us to have to constantly be worried about having to incorporate the green belt because we're told to by somebody else. So again, you know, really welcome movement from government. A couple of other parts that we've responded to in the calculation. I'm still a little bit unsure of some elements of it, such as the what they describe as the urban uplift. So we'll probably await a little bit more detail on those. But another really big positive is it removes something called the duty to cooperate. That duty to cooperate was a mechanism within the policy to force you to work with other neighbouring local authorities if the need in one area was greater, so that you could then find out a more consolidated approach to delivering local plans across area. Problem with it is it was largely abused. It became a tug of war. Each area would quite often try to dump development on neighbouring areas, and a number of areas, and I'm not singling out us, but a number of areas have then seen local plans developed where there was a kind of pushing the numbers in a certain direction to force local neighbouring authorities to have to take on numbers, and it was a particular problem in urban areas as well, actually. So again, it's something that we still are going to have to work with our neighbouring authorities, such as Dorset Council. It's on a similar timeline to us, but it's a much more collaborative and less formal process, so we can work together to find the right place instead of kind of gaming the system. So I think it was important for us to reflect that is a really big change that government has done. And I think, we've got the planners on the call today, but I think we share a very strong view collectively, both politically and the officers, that it's a significant improvement on the position that we were before, and the ability it has to keep those levers of placemaking for our local plan, to be able to actually use a local plan to define the area that we want the BCP region to be in the future, rather than just a plan for numbers on a page of where we want to build stuff, I think is really welcome. And in particular, as I mentioned, I think it significantly reduces the risk element of our pretty accelerated timeline, so that it gives us the increased confidence that we can develop the new local plan for Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole with the placemaking elements that we want by the end of the year. So sorry for a bit of a lengthy introduction, but it is really important, because this document will be the very first local plan for BCP, and it will be the document that decides how our place is long into the future. So thank you very much for allowing me to introduce it.
Thanks, Councillor Broadhead. That's a very detailed introduction there. Laura, is there anything you want to add to that before I open up to members' questions?
I think Councillor Broadhead has given a really good introduction to that, and I'll just echo his comments that we're thinking this is a very positive thing for us in bringing forward the local plan, and it gives us that confidence to take forward those proposals which we have been working on, but this changing sort of government approach really it will help embed that and give us that certainty to move forward to local plan examination. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought the consultation response was excellent, and very reasonable. And again, that does give us, a lot more control going forward. So thanks for that. Does any members like to speak to this? So, Councillor Twain. Oh, Andy. Sorry, Twain, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, more of a statement, I guess, rather than a question. I'd say thank you for this overview on this, what's coming forward here, this topic, which I'm most welcome. Yeah, lowering the targets seems to make things easier. The importance should be on the right kind of housing, in my opinion, in the right places, the right locations, and rather than having these arbitrary targets, which aren't achievable, especially when we've got a lot of our area which is surrounded by water. So yeah, I welcome this positive change. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Yes, you mentioned the impact of having students in the town and obviously providing for them. I guess for me, being representing Poole Town, it's about scale and it's about holiday homes. I don't know whether there's any opportunities that this gives us to try and make sure that we are providing for homes, and as Councillor Farr said, the supporting local need, and as not having huge developments in the town centre that a lot of the people living in town really don't like. That's actually either sitting empty or holiday lets.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, well, pardon me. The reference that I was making at the time to the students was about the errors that were prevalent in the existing standard methodology, which one of the measures that judge how many homes you have to plan for in the future as part of that methodology is about inward migration. And there was just a flaw in the methodology that just took all the inward migration that came in and assumed they didn't leave. Well, in an area like ours where we have 3 major universities, guess what? A lot of the students do leave. So I think it overinflated through that process because of that error. So that's what I was referring to. I think the deeper question that Councillor Hadley brings is absolutely the right one. There's no specifics within the updated policy, as I understand it, or indeed the kind of your standard local plan to kind of force you to consider things like second homes or type of developments, etc. The big reason that I'm so positive about these changes is that's absolutely what we should be doing as part of the local plan. I've been on record before as saying that the local plan should be the plan for our place, rather than just a very dry document about put that number there, that number there, and that number there. It can be the framework for the future, essentially. That is so much harder if you're having to go crazy hard, frankly, for want of a better term, and really force the over-densification of urban areas and the widespread release of greenbelt to meet an arbitrary figure. So I'm feeling now more comfortable that because we have some comfort in planning for the correct number that takes into consideration the local need. And let's be really honest, what we're not saying here is, phew, we don't need to build anything anymore. We have to be aspirational for the future. We have a growing population. We have a growing younger population that are still struggling to get on the housing ladder. And, we are one of those areas where houses are more expensive, and therefore that choice, that difficulty is more stark than many others, and we can't walk away from that duty. So clearly we need to be providing more homes, and this is not a movement away for that. What we do need to provide, which I think is your point, is the right type of homes in the right places, and these changes I think give us much further control over that. What we're also trying to do, and this is a kind of a minor aside, is to use the opportunity for the local plan combined with now the level of expertise we've got in our wider planning function, in future places, in the relationships we've got with others, to bring as much of that expertise together as we're preparing the local plan, so that we're using all of that. We're using the sites that have been promoted to us and the information that's come from there. We're using some of the regeneration plans that we are looking at ourselves are doing to make sure that the local plan itself takes into consideration both the trajectory, but also, as I think your point, to use Poole Town Centre as an example, the really detailed analysis is going on the ground about exactly what is needed there and what tenure mix, for instance, we might want to see in the future. So a long-winded way of saying, it's not a necessary update as part of these, but the very changes that these do means that the primacy of all of that is so much clearer and I think so much more ambitious.
Thanks, Phil. Anyone else like to speak to this? No. Okay, so thanks for your time, folks. I mean, it's a great step forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr.
Oh,
Chairman, I have
sorry,
my hand up.
Councillor Butt, did I miss you again? Sorry.
That's okay. Don't worry. Just a very, very quick one. Thank you, Councillor Broadhead, for that expo. Just one question. Obviously, the protection of the green belt is extremely important. Can we give an assurance that we will never have to build on the green belt, or is it just something that we will avoid at all costs? Thank you.
Right, picking that up, Phil?
Yes, I can. So, look, I might not be doing this job forever. So, what I think is just what I think. I've been very clear that we've been really pushing back against particularly inappropriate residential in the greenbelt, and I made a commitment in full council only recently. Very firm commitment that my administration will be taking the greenbelt, particularly for that inappropriate residential development, off the table. Because it needs to be clear. I think people need to know. You can't say, don't worry, we'll try and protect it as much as possible and honestly trust us, because I just don't think people have that much trust in politicians, frankly. And I do think that we've demonstrated as part of the work that Laura and the whole team have been doing over the last couple of years, that we can move forward really positively with a brownfield, urban development-led approach for the local plan, precisely because it actually helps you protect the green belt and is much more sustainable into the future. So the more people that are living in our urban areas, they don't need to drive as much, so they use more buses and cycle more, so it helps with our climate credentials, it helps with the type of demographic, which tend to be the younger people or those that are downsizing that enjoy that as well, and also really helps with our regeneration. So I absolutely not only think it's possible, I think it's the right thing to be doing. In the future, at some point in the future, there may be an intelligent conversation that we've got to have around family homes, and there might well be some examples where you might want to take a little bit of a look at something that's currently classified as green belt, because you can get really good affordable family homes in that area. I don't think we're there yet, and I think actually as part of the local plan process that I've been overseeing, I don't think we need to consider that right now, but obviously the future will be what the future will be. But I can give Councillor Butt the firm assurance, and anybody watching this, that my administration will protect the green belt at all costs. Thank you.
I'll thank you so much, Councillor Broadhead. I'll take that as a yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks both. I don't see anyone else indicating, unless I've missed anybody. Yeah, but I think that was an interesting statement we mentioned about brownfield sites. I think that's a frustration for a lot of residents. When they see these brownfield sites, which obviously a lot of them are under the control of the council, not being developed. And I think the sooner we get those, made those to homes for local people, it would benefit us all. So thanks for those comments. I think we'll move on from there. So I think so. Thanks to both for staying on, and thanks Councillor Broadhead for staying on, and Flora as well. I know it's a long night, so thanks for. Sorry it's taken so long. We thought we finished at 8:30. I was still hoping to get back for the Mandalorian. Okay, thanks both anyway. Okay, so we'll just move to agenda item number 9, which is the work plan. Which obviously you've all seen that in the papers. Obviously this is the last meeting of this committee, but I don't think there's any reason why any member would like to put in a scrutiny request form in, because that could always be taken forward to the new committee, the new chair and vice chair, whoever they will be in the new council going forwards. So I don't think that's a stop of scrutiny, because this committee it's going to be our last meeting. Please, if you've got anything you would like looked at, please put it forwards. Okay, so if anyone hasn't got any discussions on that, I think we should close the meeting there and move on. And so, before I go, Councillor Brick, is this your last scrutiny meeting, or have you others booked in? Oh, if you, I was going to say, if this is your last one, we're going to wish you wish you very well for the future. But thank you very much. Yeah, but so thanks for everyone's input on for this meeting, and for the officers, you know, that have come in, you know, remotely, and for looking after us. You know, I think we've all done a great job. It's been done in a good spirit as well. You know, I know we disagree on perhaps many things, but I think actually we probably agree on more than we disagree, which probably doesn't get picked up by the public as much. But thanks for everyone for the spirit that everyone's done. So, Councillor. Oh, trees. Sorry, I've forgotten about the trees. How can I do that? Sorry to interrupt climate. I forgot about the trees. I hope they forgive me. Sorry. Do you want to, sorry. Do you want to come with your tree summary?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, since we last met, we had the first tree and woodland strategy working group. This was held on the 2nd of February, where I jumped in at the deep end, volunteering to be the lead member. Since I've gone on to plant some trees, volunteering at the Park Foundation, and found out I've planted 7 different varieties of trees, and I don't, you know, learned a bit of on the job, got a bit of on the job training there, so that was useful. Yeah, so the scope of the group is to join up the policy of the 3 legacy councils. So that's something which isn't in place yet, so that's the purpose of the strategy. So looking at how the trees are managed, you know, what the residents need to know, what you know, what to expect, and ongoing maintenance, where they are planted, and how residents can get involved with that, with these sort of things like what I mentioned, what I got involved in myself actually with other residents. It also covers heathlands and parks, mitigating for climate change. And at present, there's no shared vision among council departments when it comes to trees and the woodland strategy. So there's quite a bit of work to be done. There was, I forget the name of the lady that did the presentation, but she was excellent. She was excellent. So she had a lot of enthusiasm and really knew her stuff. There was a lot to take in. So also we looked at the neighbourhood plan for planting trees, of the sort of the urban features, which was mentioned earlier in this meeting. So I believe there's going to be another meeting before PERDA, before the election period kicks in. That date hasn't been confirmed.
Yeah, we're hoping to get a date
just
soon.
to say, yeah, it will be towards the end of March, but as it's a non-public meeting, it can still take place during the election period.
Okay, thank you.
That's good.
So that's a quick overview from me. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. That's very good. And obviously, hopefully there'll be some good work coming from that working group. Okay, so I'll finish off there. But again, thanks everybody. Safe journey, and thanks for if anyone's watching online for bearing with us. So I'll declare the meeting closed. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Chair.